They say a woman's breaking point comes when the world watches her fall. For Elena Moretti, that moment arrived on a sun-drenched Florence street when her ex-husband's cruel laughter echoed off ancient stone walls. Too fat, worthless. His words cut deeper than any blade. The crowd gathered like vultures, feeding on her humiliation. But what her tormentor didn't know was that the slight curve beneath her dress held a secret: twins. And what no one suspected was that their father stood watching from the shadows, a man whose name alone could silence entire cities. If you're ready to witness how one woman's darkest moment became her greatest transformation, stay with me until the end. And when you do, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Elena's story travels across the world. Quote, "The morning sun painted Florence in shades of gold and amber, transforming the ancient city into something from a Renaissance painting. Tourists meandered through the Piazza della Signoria, cameras clicking, gelato melting in their hands, completely unaware that just 3 blocks away, a woman's entire world was about to shatter in the most public way imaginable. Elena Moretti stood frozen on the cobblestone street, her shopping bag slipping from trembling fingers. The fresh vegetables she'd bought at the market scattered across the ground, tomatoes rolling into the gutter, herbs crushed beneath careless feet. But she barely noticed. Her entire focus had narrowed to the man striding toward her with purposeful malice. Marco Russo, her ex-husband. The man who'd spent 5 years systematically destroying her self-worth before she'd finally found the courage to leave. "Well, well," Marco's voice carried across the street, loud enough to turn heads. "Look what we have here, still waddling around Florence like you own the place, Elena?" She wanted to move, to turn and walk away with whatever dignity she could salvage. But her legs had turned to stone. 3 months. It had been 3 months since the divorce was finalized. 3 months since she'd last seen his face. She'd hoped it would be forever. "I'm just shopping, Marco." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Please, just let me pass." But Marco wasn't alone. He never was anymore. The woman clinging to his arm was young, barely 22, Elena guessed, with platinum blonde hair and a dress that cost more than Elena used to make in a month. This was Alessia, the woman Marco had been seeing for the last year of their marriage, the woman he'd sworn meant nothing. "Shopping?" Marco's laugh was harsh, designed to wound. "For what? More food you don't need?" He turned to the small crowd that was beginning to gather, playing to his audience like the narcissist he'd always been. "My ex-wife, ladies and gentlemen, I spent 5 years trying to help her, trying to encourage her to take care of herself. But look at her now." Elena felt her face burning. The crowd was growing larger, tourists with their phones out, locals pausing their afternoon passaggio to watch the drama unfold. An elderly woman clutched her shopping bag and whispered to her companion. 2 teenage girls giggled behind their hands. "Marco, please." "Please what?" He stepped closer, and Elena caught the familiar scent of his cologne, the same one that used to make her feel safe before she learned what kind of man really wore it. "Please stop telling the truth. You've let yourself go, Elena. You were never exactly a prize, but at least you used to try. Now look at you, getting fatter every day, hiding behind those shapeless dresses like anyone wants to see what's underneath." The words hit like physical blows. Elena's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, to the small swell that was just beginning to show. At 13 weeks pregnant, most people wouldn't notice unless they were looking. But she noticed. She noticed every change, every flutter, every reminder that her body was no longer just her own. "You're pathetic," Marco continued, warming to his theme. Alessia giggled beside him, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his arm like a cat marking territory. "I wasted the best years of my life on you. Do you know what a relief it was when you finally signed those papers? Like being released from prison." "That's enough." Elena's voice was barely a whisper, but something in her tone made Marco pause. For just a second, she saw a flash of the man she'd once loved, or thought she'd loved. Young, charming, full of promises about the life they'd build together. Then his face hardened again. "Enough? I've barely started. You want to know what everyone's really thinking? They're wondering what I ever saw in you. They're wondering how someone like me ended up with someone so—" "I said that's enough." The new voice cut through Marco's tirade like a blade through silk. Deep, controlled, carrying an authority that made everyone in the vicinity go still. Even the tourists sensed something had shifted, their phones lowering slightly as they tried to identify the source of that voice. Elena knew it immediately. She'd heard it whisper in her ear during stolen moments, had felt it rumble through his chest when she laid her head there in the quiet hours before dawn. A voice she'd never expected to hear in this context, in this moment of ultimate humiliation. Dante Valieri. He emerged from the shadows of a nearby cafe, moving with the kind of fluid grace that spoke of absolute confidence. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marco made in 6 months. His dark hair was styled back from a face that belonged on Roman statues. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes so dark they appeared black in certain lights. But it wasn't his appearance that made the crowd unconsciously step back. It was something else, something that radiated from him like heat from a forge. Power. The kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone could feel it in their bones. Elena's breath caught. What was he doing here? They'd been so careful, meeting in private, away from prying eyes. Dante's world and hers weren't meant to intersect like this, in broad daylight, in front of dozens of witnesses. Marco, oblivious as always to anything that didn't directly concern him, barely glanced at the newcomer. This is a private conversation. Move along. The corner of Dante's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like the expression a wolf might make before deciding whether something was prey or simply an annoyance. Private? You're shouting insults at a woman in the middle of a public street. That's many things, but private isn't one of them. Who the hell are you? Marco's voice took on an edge of irritation. Her new boyfriend. Trust me, friend, you're making a mistake. She's not worth the trouble. High maintenance, emotionally needy, and as you can see, he gestured crudely at Elena's body, not exactly taking care of herself these days. Elena wanted to disappear. Having Dante witness this was somehow worse than enduring it alone. He'd only ever seen her at her best, dressed for their private dinners, confident in the sanctuary of his presence. Now he was seeing her as Marco saw her, diminished, humiliated, weak. But when she dared to meet Dante's eyes, she didn't find the disgust or pity she expected. Instead, there was something cold and dangerous burning there, like ice that could cut. Not worth the trouble, Dante repeated, his voice so soft that Elena barely heard it. Yet somehow, it carried to every person in the growing crowd. Interesting assessment. Tell me, how long were you married? Marco puffed up his chest, apparently mistaking Dante's calm for weakness. 5 years. 5 long years before I finally wise up and... 5 years, Dante interrupted, during which you consistently cheated on your wife, drained her savings to support your gambling habit, and systematically destroyed her self-esteem to mask your own inadequacies. The crowd went silent. Marco's face turned an interesting shade of purple. How dare you? You don't know anything about our marriage. I know enough. Dante took a step forward. Just one step, but something about it made Marco retreat. I know that you're a small man who found a good woman and spent years trying to break her because her strength made you feel weak. I know that you're now parading your mistress around like a trophy, hoping it will fill whatever empty space exists where your character should be. Alessia made a small sound of protest, but Marco silenced her with a look. His attention was fixed entirely on Dante now, and Elena could see the exact moment when recognition flickered in his eyes. She watched it happen in stages. First, the careful study of Dante's face, trying to place where he'd seen it before. Then, the subtle widening of his eyes as memory connected with reality. Finally, the complete draining of color from his cheeks as understanding crashed over him. Dante Valieri. The Dante Valieri. Elena had seen that same progression of realization before. It was what happened when people in Florence, in all of Tuscany, really, recognized who Dante was. Not just a wealthy businessman, though he was certainly that. Not just a powerful man, though power surrounded him like a cloak. Dante Valieri was the kind of man who appeared in whispered conversations and careful euphemisms. The kind of man whose name alone could open doors or close them permanently. You... Marco's voice cracked. You're... Yes. Dante's tone was almost bored. Now that we've established that, let's discuss why you think it's acceptable to publicly humiliate the mother of my children. The words dropped into the sudden silence like stones into still water. Elena felt the impact ripple through her entire body. My children. He'd said it. Here, now, in front of everyone. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Phones that had lowered rose again, cameras focusing, fingers probably already typing furious messages to friends. This was the kind of gossip that would spread through Florence like wildfire. Dante Valieri, the city's most eligible and dangerous bachelor, claiming paternity of Elena Moretti's baby. Except Dante had said children, plural. Marco's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Alessia had gone completely still, her grip on his arm loosening as self-preservation kicked in. Even she, young and sheltered as she appeared, knew better than to stand too close when Dante Valieri's attention turned cold. That's not, Marco stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. She never said, why would she tell you anything? Dante's voice could have cut glass. You lost the right to know about her life the moment you chose to betray her trust. The moment you made her feel small. The moment you decided that your own insecurities mattered more than her happiness. He moved closer to Elena, and she felt his hand settle on her lower back, a gesture of protection, of claiming, of comfort all at once. The touch sent warmth through her despite the sick churning in her stomach. But I'm curious, Dante continued, his attention still fixed on Marco like a predator studying prey. What exactly did you hope to accomplish here? Did you think humiliating her would make you feel like more of a man? Did you believe that tearing her down would somehow elevate you? Marco's eyes darted around, looking for escape routes, for allies, for anything that might save him from the corner he'd talked himself into. I didn't know she was... if I'd known she was with you. So you only show respect when a woman belongs to someone powerful enough to make you afraid? Dante's question was razor sharp. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, or lack thereof. Elena wanted to speak, to stop this before it escalated further, but her throat had closed up. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, hear the whispered conversation spreading through the crowd like a virus. Her secret, the pregnancy she'd been so carefully hiding, the relationship she and Dante had kept private for months, was now public knowledge. There was no taking it back. Dante, she managed to whisper, her hand finding his arm. Please, let's just go. But Dante wasn't finished. His hand tightened slightly on her back, reassuring, before he addressed Marco again. You're going to do something for me. Right now, in front of all these witnesses. Marco swallowed hard. What? You're going to apologize to Elena, sincerely, for every cruel word you've ever spoken to her, for every time you made her feel less than she is, for every wound you inflicted on her confidence and her heart. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Dante's voice dropped even lower, and Elena felt the subtle shift in his posture that meant he was done being patient. And if you're thinking of refusing, let me be very clear about the consequences. I have the power to make your life very uncomfortable in this city. Your job at the bank? How secure do you think that is when I make a single phone call? Your apartment in Oltrarno, who do you think owns the building? That car you're so proud of, the one you bought with money from your wife's savings? I could have it towed within the hour. The blood had completely drained from Marco's face now. Alessia had taken a full step back, her designer purse clutched to her chest like a shield. Around them, the crowd watched with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for car accidents. This is insane, Marco tried weakly. You can't just... I can. Dante's tone was final. And I will. Unless you do exactly what I'm telling you to do. Apologize. Now. Elena watched her ex-husband struggle with the decision. She could see the war playing out across his face. Pride versus self-preservation, ego versus survival instinct. For a long moment, she thought he might actually refuse, might let his arrogance override his common sense. Then, slowly, reluctantly, Marco turned to face her. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping, and his eyes held fury and humiliation in equal measure. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. I apologize, Elena, for today and for how I treated you during our marriage. The words were clearly painful for him, each syllable dragged out like a tooth being pulled. But Dante wasn't satisfied. That's not good enough, he said quietly. Tell her what you're sorry for, specifically. Marco's hands curled into fists at his sides, but he complied. I'm sorry for criticizing your appearance, for making you feel worthless, for cheating on you and then making you think it was your fault, for taking your money and your trust and throwing both away." His voice was getting rougher now, emotion bleeding through despite his efforts to maintain control. "I'm sorry for every time I made you cry, every time I made you doubt yourself, every time I chose my own ego over your feelings." Elena stood frozen, unsure how to respond. Part of her had dreamed of this moment, of Marco finally acknowledging the pain he'd caused, of hearing him admit what he'd done. But now that it was happening, she felt nothing but a strange, hollow emptiness. "And?" Dante prompted. Marco's jaw worked. "And you deserved better. You deserved better than what I gave you." For several long moments, the only sound was the distant traffic and the murmur of the crowd. Elena could feel tears pricking at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough over Marco Russo. He didn't get any more of her tears. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "I accept your apology." Dante's hand moved from her back to her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. The gesture was possessive, protective, and utterly public. If there had been any doubt about their relationship before, it was gone now. "Now leave," Dante said to Marco, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And if I hear that you've so much as spoken Elena's name in anything but the most respectful terms, if I catch even a whisper of you bad-mouthing her or spreading rumors about her, you will discover exactly how uncomfortable I can make your life." "Are we clear?" Marco nodded jerkily. "Crystal." "Then go." Elena watched as her ex-husband turned and walked away. Alessia hurrying to catch up with him, her heels clicking frantically against the cobblestones. The crowd began to disperse, though she could see phones still out, still recording, still capturing this moment that would probably be all over social media within the hour. When they were finally alone, or as alone as anyone could be on a Florence street, Dante turned to her. His expression had softened, the cold authority replaced with something warmer, more concerned. "Are you all right?" Elena laughed, but it came out shaky. "I don't know. Ask me in a few hours when I've processed what just happened." "I'm sorry." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I didn't plan to announce it like that. But when I heard what he was saying to you, when I saw the way he was treating you, you couldn't help yourself," Elena finished. "I know. That's very you." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Elena was acutely aware of the curious glances still being thrown their way, of the whispers that would follow her now wherever she went in the city. Her private life had just become public property, and there was no undoing it. "We need to talk," Dante said finally. "Really talk. There are things we should discuss, things I should have said before now." "Yes," Elena agreed, "but maybe somewhere less public." A small smile tugged at his lips. "My car is around the corner. Let me take you home. Or," he hesitated slightly, "you could come to the villa, if you're comfortable with that." The villa. Elena had been there twice before, both times feeling like she was stepping into another world. Dante's home was a sprawling Renaissance estate on the hills overlooking Florence, all marble floors and priceless artwork and rooms that echoed with centuries of history. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure, much like the man who owned it. The villa, she decided, will have more privacy there. Dante nodded and began guiding her toward his car, his hand never leaving hers. As they walked, Elena's mind raced. Everything had changed in the span of 15 minutes. Her secret was out. Dante had publicly claimed her and the babies, the life she'd been carefully constructing for herself, quiet, private, safe, had been shattered. But as she glanced at the man beside her, at the strong profile and the protective way he kept her close, she wondered if maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The car was a sleek black Mercedes, parked in a narrow side street where most vehicles couldn't fit. Dante's driver, a mountain of a man named Carlo, who Elena had met once before, opened the back door with a respectful nod. "Miss Moretti," he greeted, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone his size. "Carlo," she replied, managing a small smile. The interior of the car was cool and quiet, a sanctuary from the chaos of the street. As soon as the door closed behind them, Elena felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Dante gave Carlo an address, the villa, and then raised the privacy screen, cocooning them in their own private world. "Talk to me," Dante said, turning to face her fully. "Tell me what you're thinking." Where did she even start? Elena took a breath, trying to organize the storm of thoughts and emotions swirling through her mind. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that in the span of 15 minutes, you turned my entire life upside down." Dante's expression flickered with something that might have been regret. "I know, and I'm sorry for that. But Elena, I'm not sorry for claiming you, for making it clear that you're under my protection, because you are, whether the world knows it or not." "But now the world does know," Elena pointed out. "Now everyone knows that I'm pregnant with your babies. Now I'm going to be watched, talked about, gossiped over. People are going to wonder who I am, how I landed someone like you, what I could possibly offer that—" "Stop!" Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Stop diminishing yourself. Stop letting Marco's poison continue to affect how you see yourself." "I'm not—" "You are. You're sitting here telling me that people will wonder what you could possibly offer, as if you're not intelligent, beautiful, kind, and strong enough to bring me to my knees." Elena's breath caught. They'd never talked like this before, never been this direct about their feelings. Their relationship had developed in quiet moments and stolen afternoons, built on conversation and connection rather than grand declarations. "Dante, let me finish." His dark eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. "When I met you 4 months ago, I thought I knew what I wanted from life. Power, respect, control over my world. Then you walked into that gallery opening, and for the first time in years, none of that seemed to matter as much as simply being near you." Elena remembered that night. She'd been working at the small gallery in Santo Spirito, a quiet job that let her rebuild her confidence after the divorce. The owner had connections, and sometimes important people attended the openings. Dante had been one of them, though at the time, Elena hadn't known who he was. She'd only known that when he'd stopped in front of one of her favorite pieces, a modern interpretation of Persephone's descent, and asked her opinion, something had shifted in her chest. "You were wearing a blue dress," Dante continued, a small smile playing at his lips. "Dark blue, almost midnight. And you talked about the painting like it was a friend you were introducing me to, pointing out details I'd never have noticed on my own. You made me see it differently. You made me see everything differently." "It was just a conversation about art," Elena protested weakly. "It was never just anything." Dante's thumb continued its gentle stroking across her cheekbone. "Every moment with you has been extraordinary. Every conversation, every smile, every time you trusted me enough to let your guard down. And when you told me about Marco, about what he'd done to you, about how he'd spent years making you feel worthless," his jaw tightened visibly. "I wanted to find him and make him understand what it feels like to be systematically destroyed. But you didn't. No. Because you asked me not to. Because you said you wanted to move forward, not backward. Because you were trying to be the bigger person." He shook his head slightly. "I respected that choice. But watching him today, hearing the venom he was spewing at you in front of everyone, I couldn't stand by. I couldn't let him continue to tear you down without consequences." Elena understood. Of course she understood. Dante was a man of action, someone who'd built his power on never backing down, never letting threats go unanswered. Asking him to ignore Marco's cruelty had probably taken more restraint than she'd realized. "So now what?" she asked. "Now that everyone knows, now that you've publicly claimed me and the babies, what happens next?" Dante was quiet for a moment, his hand dropping from her face to find hers again. "That depends on you, on what you want, on what you're comfortable with." "I don't understand." "Elena, I need you to hear what I'm about to say." His voice was serious, almost solemn. "I didn't plan to tell the world about us today. I hadn't thought through the implications, the attention it would bring you. But now that it's done, I want you to know that I meant every word. You are carrying my children, and that makes you one of the most important people in my world. I will protect you, support you, give you anything you need, but I also need to know what you want from this. From us." The question hung between them, heavy with implications. What did she want? A month ago, She might have said she wanted to raise her children alone, to prove to herself and the world that she didn't need a man to be complete. But that was before Marco's public humiliation, before Dante's fierce defense, before the reality of just how complicated her life was about to become. I want, she started, then stopped, searching for the right words. I want my children to grow up safe, loved, protected. I want them to see a relationship built on respect, not criticism, on partnership, not power games. And you think I can give you that? Elena met his eyes. I think you already have. These past 4 months, you've shown me what it feels like to be valued, to have my opinions matter, my feelings considered. You've never made me feel less than, never used your power to diminish me. Even now, you're asking what I want instead of telling me what will happen. Because what you want matters more than what I want, Dante said simply. Always. The car slowed and Elena glanced out the window to see the familiar gates of the villa coming into view. Tall wrought iron, backed by stone walls that had stood for centuries. Beyond them, she could see the main house rising against the Tuscan hillside. Cream-colored stone, terracotta roof tiles, windows that glinted in the afternoon sun. Home. Something whispered in the back of her mind. This could be home. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Carlo brought the car to a smooth stop in the circular drive. Through the window, Elena could see the villa's front entrance, a massive wooden door that had probably witnessed countless arrivals over the centuries. How many women had passed through those doors? How many had arrived as she was arriving now, uncertain of their future but hoping for something better? Come inside, Dante said softly. Let me take care of you. We can figure out the rest together. Elena nodded, accepting his hand as he helped her from the car. The late afternoon sun was warm on her face, and the air smelled of lavender and rosemary from the gardens. It was beautiful here, peaceful in a way that the city never was. Inside, the villa was cool and quiet. Their footsteps echoed on marble floors, past rooms filled with furniture that belonged in museums. But Dante didn't take her to any of the formal rooms. Instead, he led her upstairs to a private sitting area she'd never seen before. A cozy space with comfortable chairs, built-in bookshelves, and windows overlooking the gardens. This is my favorite room in the house, he explained, guiding her to one of the chairs. It's where I come when I want to think, to be away from everything else. He was sharing something private, Elena realized, letting her into a space that was his sanctuary. The gesture touched her more than he probably knew. Sit, he urged. I'll get you some water. Have you eaten today? I was at the market, Elena reminded him. Before everything went to hell, Dante finished grimly. I'll have Maria prepare something light. You need to eat, especially now. He disappeared before she could protest, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts. She settled into the chair, her hands instinctively moving to her stomach. Twins. 2 tiny lives growing inside her, completely unaware of the drama their existence had caused. I'm sorry, she whispered to them. I'm sorry your introduction to the world was so chaotic, but I promise, I'll protect you. I'll make sure you grow up knowing you're loved and wanted and valued. They already know that. Elena looked up to find Dante standing in the doorway, a glass of water in his hand and an expression of such tenderness on his face that it made her chest ache. How could you possibly know that? She asked as he handed her the glass. Because they have you as their mother. He pulled up a chair beside hers, close enough that their knees touched. Because even when you were terrified and unsure, even when Marco was tearing you down in front of everyone, your first instinct was to protect them. I saw it, the way your hand moved to shield your stomach, the way you positioned your body. You're already fighting for them. Elena took a sip of water, letting his words settle over her. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks ago. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, when to tell you, if I should tell you at all. Why wouldn't you tell me? Because... She set the glass down carefully, gathering her courage. Because I know who you are, Dante. What you are. And I worried that bringing children into your world, into your life, might put them in danger. There. She'd said it. The fear that had been eating at her since the moment she'd seen those 2 positive pregnancy tests, since she'd heard the word twins from her doctor's lips. Dante was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, careful. You're right to worry. My world isn't safe, not in the way that most people understand safety. There are risks, dangers that come with my name and my position. Elena's heart sank, but he continued. But Elena, there are also protections, resources. People loyal to me who would die before letting harm come to anyone under my care. And these children, our children, they will have everything I can give them. Not just money or material things, but safety, education, opportunities. They will never want for anything. Except maybe a normal life, Elena said quietly. Normal is overrated. Dante's lips quirked slightly. Normal is what you had with Marco, and look where that got you. I'm offering you something different. Not perfect, not without complications, but built on honesty and respect. He had a point. Her normal marriage had been a disaster. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid of extraordinary. So what exactly are you offering? Elena asked, needing to hear him say it clearly. Dante took her hands in his dark eyes serious. I'm offering you protection. A home here, in the villa, where you and the children will be safe. Financial security, you'll never have to worry about money again. My name and my resources to ensure our children have every advantage. He paused. And if you want it, I'm offering you me. Not just as the father of your children, but as a partner, as someone who wants to build a life with you. Elena's breath caught. Dante, I know it's fast, he continued. I know we haven't known each other that long, and maybe you need more time to be sure. But I've spent my entire adult life making quick decisions based on instinct, and my instinct about you has never been wrong. From the moment we met, I knew you were different, special. And now that you're carrying my children, now that the world knows you're mine, I want to make it official. Official how? However you want. His thumbs traced patterns on the backs of her hands. We can take it slow, let you move into one of the guest suites while we figure things out. Or we can be honest about what this is, about what we both want, and move forward together. It's your choice. Elena looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd defended her in the street, who'd forced her ex-husband to apologize, who was now offering her everything he had. There was something almost vulnerable in his expression, a crack in the armor that he showed the world. He was afraid, she realized, afraid that she'd say no, that she'd walk away, that she'd choose the uncertainty of independence over the complications of his world. I don't need time, she heard herself say. I've spent enough of my life being afraid, being cautious, trying to make safe choices. And where did it get me? Married to a man who despised me, hiding from the world, terrified of taking up space. Elena, you make me feel brave, she continued, the words flowing now like they'd been dammed up too long. When I'm with you, I remember who I was before Marco, before the criticism and the gaslighting and the constant feeling that I wasn't good enough. You see me, Dante, really see me. And I see you too, not just the power and the danger, but the man underneath who brings me coffee exactly how I like it and asks about my opinion on art and holds me like I'm something precious. Dante's grip on her hands tightened. Is that a yes? It's a yes to trying, to seeing where this goes, to trusting that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. The smile that broke across his face was like sunshine after a storm, bright, warm, transformative. Before Elena could say anything else, he was pulling her into his arms, careful of her stomach, holding her close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. You won't regret this, he murmured against her hair. I swear to you, Elena, I will spend every day proving that you made the right choice. Elena closed her eyes, letting herself sink into his embrace. Outside the window, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the Tuscan hills in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere in Florence, Marco was probably nursing his wounded pride and planning how to spin the day's events in his favor. Somewhere, people were gossiping about the gallery girl who'd somehow captured Dante Valieri's attention. But here, in this quiet room with this extraordinary man, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe, valued, home. Tell me about them, Dante said suddenly, his hand moving to rest gently on her stomach. The twins. What did the doctor say? Elena smiled, her own hand covering his. She said they're healthy, growing right on schedule, both heartbeats strong. I was so shocked when she said both. I just stared at the screen trying to process it. 2 babies. Dante's voice held a note of wonder. Do you know, are they boys? Girls? Too early to tell. We won't know for a few more weeks. She paused. Does it matter to you? Not even a little. He shifted so he could look at her properly, his hand still warm against her stomach. Boys, girls, one of each. I'll love them because they're ours. Because they're part of you. The words settled into Elena's chest, warm and reassuring. This was real. This was happening. She was going to be a mother, Dante was going to be a father, and somehow, impossibly, they were going to figure it out together. There's something else, Elena said hesitantly. Something I haven't told anyone yet. What is it? I'm terrified. The admission came out in a rush. I'm terrified that I won't be a good mother, that I won't know what to do, that I'll mess them up somehow. I'm terrified that your world will be too dangerous for them, that I won't be strong enough to protect them. I'm terrified that— Stop, Dante interrupted gently. Elena, every parent is terrified. It's natural, especially with your first children. But you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together, make mistakes together, learn together. And as for my world— His jaw tightened slightly. I promise you, no one will ever threaten our children. Anyone who tries will learn very quickly why that's a mistake they'll only make once. There was steel in his voice, a promise that was also a threat. Elena should probably have been frightened by it, by the casual way he implied violence. But instead she felt oddly comforted. Her children would have a father who would move heaven and earth to keep them safe. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Dante called permission to enter, and a woman in her 50s appeared carrying a tray of food. Maria, Elena remembered, the housekeeper who'd been with Dante for years. I brought some fruit, cheese, and fresh bread, Maria said, setting the tray on a nearby table. Her eyes went to Elena, and there was something knowing in her expression. And some of that herbal tea that's good for expecting mothers. Elena felt herself blush. Of course the staff would know. Of course they'd figure it out. But Maria's smile was warm, genuine. Congratulations, miss. The house will be happy to have children in it again. Again? Elena filed that away for later questioning as Maria bustled out, closing the door quietly behind her. She seems pleased, Elena observed. Maria loves children. She had 3 of her own, all grown now, and she's been not so subtly hinting that I should settle down and start a family. Dante moved to the tray, fixing a plate for Elena. She's going to spoil those babies rotten. The image made Elena smile. This fierce man brought to his knees by an older woman's maternal instincts. Eat, Dante ordered gently, handing her the plate. You need to keep your strength up. Elena accepted the food, suddenly realizing how hungry she was. The confrontation with Marco had driven all thoughts of eating from her mind, but now her stomach was making its needs very clear. They sat in comfortable silence as she ate, Dante watching her with an expression of contentment that seemed almost foreign on his usually serious face. The light continued to fade outside, the gardens taking on that magical quality that dusk always brought. I should call the gallery, Elena said suddenly, remembering her job. Tell them I won't be in tomorrow. Or— She paused, uncertain. I don't know what I should tell them, actually. Tell them you're taking a leave of absence, Dante suggested, effective immediately. You can decide later if you want to go back or pursue something else. I can't just quit my job. Why not? Dante's question was genuine, curious. Do you love it? Is it fulfilling? Does it bring you joy? Elena considered. The gallery job had been a lifeline after her divorce, something to occupy her time and rebuild her confidence. But love it? It's fine. It pays my bills and lets me be around art. Then find something you actually love. Dante leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on her. Open your own gallery if you want. Curate private collections. Commission pieces from artists you admire. Whatever interests you, pursue it without worrying about the money or the practicality. That's one of the advantages of being with me. You get to choose what you do with your time based on passion, not necessity. The idea was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Elena had spent so long in survival mode, focused on paying rent and rebuilding her life piece by piece, that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to dream big. I don't know what I'd do, she admitted. You don't have to decide today, or this week, or even this month. Take your time. Focus on the pregnancy, on taking care of yourself. The rest will come. Elena finished her food, her mind already spinning with possibilities. What would she do if money was no object? What passions had she set aside during her marriage because Marco had deemed them impractical or stupid? Art restoration, maybe? She'd always loved the idea of bringing damaged pieces back to life, finding the beauty beneath layers of grime and neglect. Or maybe teaching, sharing her knowledge with others who felt the same wonder she did when looking at a perfectly composed painting. The possibilities felt endless, overwhelming in the best way. "Stay tonight," Dante said suddenly. "Let me show you which room will be yours. Let you get settled. Tomorrow we can go to your apartment and get whatever you need. But tonight, just stay." Elena knew she should probably go home, should take time to process everything that had happened. But the truth was, she didn't want to be alone. Didn't want to return to her small apartment with its memories of loneliness and its thin walls that did nothing to block out the world. "Okay," she agreed. "I'll stay." The relief on Dante's face was almost comical. He stood, offering her his hand. "Come on, let me give you the tour of your new home." Your new home. The words sent a thrill through Elena that she didn't quite want to examine too closely. Dante led her through the villa, pointing out rooms and explaining their history. There was the formal dining room where he never ate, preferring the smaller family dining area. The library with its floor-to-ceiling shelves and ladder on wheels. The music room with its grand piano that no one had played in years. Finally, they climbed the stairs to the second floor, where the bedrooms were. Dante's was at the end of the hall. Elena had seen it before, during one of their previous encounters, but he led her instead to a room 3 doors down. "This was my mother's room," he explained, pushing open the door. Before she passed. "It has the best view of the gardens and its own bathroom. I thought you might like it." Elena stepped inside and felt her breath catch. The room was beautiful, larger than her entire apartment, with cream-colored walls and furniture that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. The bed was enormous, covered in soft linens. French doors opened onto a small balcony overlooking the gardens, where the last rays of sunlight were painting everything gold. "Dante, this is—" She couldn't find the words. "It's too much. It's not nearly enough." He came to stand beside her, his hand finding the small of her back again. "You're carrying my children, Elena. You deserve every comfort I can give you." She turned to face him, and something in her expression must have given her away because his eyes darkened with understanding. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Dante stepped back, creating distance. "You should rest. It's been a long day, and you need to take care of yourself. I'll have Maria bring you some night clothes and whatever else you need." He was being careful, Elena realized, giving her space, not assuming that staying here meant picking up where they'd left off before. It was both frustrating and endearing. "Dante?" she called as he moved toward the door. He paused, looking back. "Thank you. For today. For everything. For defending me when I couldn't defend myself." Something flickered in his expression. Satisfaction, maybe, or vindication. "I'll always defend you, Elena. That's what it means to be mine. You're under my protection now, and I take that very seriously." After he left, Elena moved to the French doors and stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens below. She could see the lights of Florence in the distance, a sprawl of civilization that seemed very far away from the quiet sanctuary of the villa. Somewhere in that city, Marco was probably spinning the day's events into a story that painted him as the victim. Somewhere, people were talking about her, speculating about how she'd landed Dante Valieri, questioning whether she was good enough, smart enough, special enough to hold his attention. But here, in this beautiful room that had once belonged to Dante's mother, Elena felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. She'd spent so long trying to be small, trying to fade into the background, trying to make herself acceptable to a man who would never be satisfied. Maybe it was time to stop shrinking. Maybe it was time to step into the extraordinary life that was being offered and see where it led. Her hands moved to her stomach again, to the tiny lives growing there. "Your father is a complicated man," she whispered to them. "Powerful and dangerous and probably a little bit crazy. But he's also kind and protective, and when he looks at me, I feel like I matter. I feel like I'm worth something." The twins, of course, didn't respond, but Elena imagined she could feel them anyway, small presences that had already changed her entire world without even being born yet. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Maria entered with an armful of clothing, soft cotton nightgowns, a robe, even some comfortable day clothes. "I took the liberty," Maria said, laying everything out on the bed. "These should fit well enough for tonight. Tomorrow we can get you properly sorted." "Thank you, Maria." Elena meant it sincerely. The older woman paused in the doorway, her expression maternal. "He's a good man, you know. Hard sometimes, but good. And the way he looks at you—" She shook her head with a small smile. "I've known Dante since he was a boy, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." After Maria left, Elena changed into one of the nightgowns and climbed into the massive bed. The sheets were soft against her skin, the mattress perfectly comfortable. Through the open French doors, she could hear the night sounds of the Tuscan countryside. Crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of wind through the gardens. She should probably be more worried about everything that had happened today. About the public exposure, the gossip that would follow, the complications of tying her life to someone like Dante. But instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this extraordinary man with his complicated world and his fierce protection could give her and her children something she'd stopped believing in. A real family, a real home, a real future built on respect and care rather than criticism and contempt. Outside her window, the Tuscan night deepened, wrapping the villa in its gentle embrace. And inside, Elena Moretti, former wife, future mother, and now under the protection of Florence's most powerful man, finally allowed herself to believe that perhaps her story wasn't ending in humiliation on that crowded street. Perhaps instead it was just beginning. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the French doors and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. For a moment she lay still, her mind piecing together fragments, soft sheets, the distant sound of birds, air that smelled like lavender instead of the exhaust fumes that usually drifted through her apartment window. Then memory crashed back. Marco. The confrontation. Dante's fierce defense. The villa. She sat up slowly, one hand moving instinctively to her stomach. Still flat enough that strangers wouldn't notice, but she knew. 13 weeks and 3 days. 2 tiny heartbeats that had already upended her entire existence. A soft knock preceded Maria's entrance, the housekeeper carrying a breakfast tray that looked like something from a magazine spread. "Good morning, Miss Moretti. I hope you slept well." Maria set the tray on a small table near the balcony. "Mr. Valieri asked me to let you know he had business in the city this morning, but he'll return by noon. He said to take your time, enjoy breakfast, and that Carlo will drive you anywhere you need to go." Elena blinked at the array of food: fresh fruit, pastries, yogurt, soft-boiled eggs, fresh squeezed orange juice. "This is too much." "Nonsense, you're eating for 3 now." Maria's smile was warm. "And between you and me, it does my heart good to have someone to cook for again. Mr. Valieri barely eats anything unless I stand over him." After Maria left, Elena moved to the balcony with her breakfast. The view was breathtaking in the morning light. Gardens stretching toward the hills, cypress trees standing like sentinels, the red roofs of Florence visible in the distance. It was the kind of beauty that belonged in paintings, not real life. Her phone buzzed, shattering the peace. Elena had left it in her purse overnight, and now she pulled it out with trepidation. 47 missed calls, over 100 text messages. Her social media notifications had exploded. With a sinking feeling, Elena opened Instagram. The top post on her feed was from a gossip account she'd never followed before. Dante Valieri's secret baby mama revealed. Below it, a grainy photo of her and Dante on the street yesterday, his hand protective on her back. The comments were a mix of curiosity, jealousy, and outright cruelty. Who even is she? She doesn't look like his type at all. Probably trapped him with the pregnancy. I heard she's a nobody who worked at some gallery. She's not even that pretty. What does he see in her? Elena's hand shook as she scrolled. More photos, more speculation, more strangers picking apart her appearance and her life. Someone had even dug up her wedding photo with Marco, posting it alongside yesterday's confrontation with the caption, From one man to another, Elena Moretti knows how to land on her feet. She set the phone down, her appetite vanishing. This was what Dante had tried to warn her about. This was the price of being connected to someone powerful. Every aspect of her life would become public property, subject to commentary and judgment from people who knew nothing about her. I thought I might find you out here. Elena jumped, turning to find Dante standing in the doorway. He'd changed from yesterday's suit into dark jeans and a white shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked casual, approachable, nothing like the terrifying figure who'd made Marco kneel. "You're back early," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Dante's eyes went to her phone, then to her face, reading her expression with unsettling accuracy. "You've been reading about yourself." It wasn't a question. Elena nodded. He crossed to her, taking her hands and pulling her to her feet. "Let me see." "Dante, it's fine. I knew there would be—" "Let me see," he repeated, his voice gentle but firm. Elena handed over her phone, watching his face as he scrolled through the posts. His expression darkened with each comment, jaw tightening, that dangerous cold settling over his features. "These people don't know you, Basishi," he said finally, handing the phone back. "They don't know your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. They see a photo and make judgments based on nothing but their own insecurities. They're not wrong, though," Elena heard herself say. "I'm not your type. I'm not glamorous or sophisticated. I'm just—" "You're the woman I chose," Dante interrupted. "The woman carrying my children. The woman I defended yesterday because watching someone hurt you was unbearable. That makes you exactly my type." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Elena, I need you to understand something. The gossip, the commentary, the strangers picking apart your life, it comes with my world. I can't change that. But I can promise you that anyone who crosses the line from gossip to actual threat will regret it. And I can remind you every single day, if necessary, that their opinions mean nothing compared to what I know to be true. Which is that you're extraordinary, that you walked into my life and changed everything, that you're going to be an incredible mother to our children." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "That I'm the lucky one in this equation, not you." Elena felt tears pricking at her eyes. "The comments said I trapped you." "Then they're idiots." Dante's voice was flat. "You didn't even want to tell me about the pregnancy. You were planning to raise them alone because you thought my world was too dangerous. If anyone was trapped, it was you, trapped by my refusal to let you face this alone." He had a point. Elena managed a small laugh. "You do have a habit of making decisions and expecting people to go along with them. It's worked well for me so far." The corner of his mouth quirked. "Though you're welcome to push back any time. I find it refreshing when people aren't afraid of me." "I'm afraid of you sometimes," Elena admitted. "Not that you'd hurt me, but that I'll wake up and realize this is all too good to be true. That I'll do something to mess it up, to prove all those commenters right." Dante pulled her closer, careful of the space between them. "You won't. And even if you did, even if you made every mistake possible, I'd still choose you. Because this isn't about perfection, Elena. It's about partnership, about building something together." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by birdsong from the gardens. Elena rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "I need to go to my apartment today," she said finally. "Get some clothes, my things, figure out what to do about my lease. Carlo can take you, or I can, if you want company." "Come with me," Elena decided. She wanted him there, wanted the buffer of his presence, when she faced the small space that had been her sanctuary after the divorce. It would feel different now, she knew. Smaller, less like home, and more like a way station she'd already left behind. An hour later, they were in the Mercedes, Carlo navigating Florence's narrow streets with practiced ease. Elena watched the city pass by. Tourists already crowding the Duomo, locals hurrying to work, street vendors setting up their carts. Normal life, continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She could feel it in the way people's eyes lingered on the car, in the whispers that followed them when they'd stopped at a traffic light. Someone had recognized the vehicle, or recognized Dante through the tinted windows. Her apartment was in a quiet neighborhood near Santa Croce, a fourth-floor walk-up in a building that had probably been standing since the Renaissance. Elena had loved it when she'd first moved in. Loved the creaky floors and the view of terracotta roofs, the way the afternoon light slanted through the windows. Now, climbing the stairs with Dante behind her, it felt shabby, small, the kind of place that belonged to a different version of herself. "It's not much," she said as she unlocked the door, suddenly self-conscious. Dante stepped inside, his eyes moving over the single room that served as bedroom, living room, and dining room. The tiny kitchen was barely an alcove. The bathroom was through a door so narrow he'd probably have to turn sideways to fit through it. But his expression when he looked at her held no judgment. "You made this place yours. I can see you in every detail." It was true. Her small collection of art books lined a makeshift shelf. Plants thrived on the windowsill despite her irregular watering schedule. The walls held prints of her favorite paintings: Caravaggio's dramatic lighting, Artemisia Gentileschi's fierce heroines, the dreamlike quality of pre-Raphaelite works. "I was happy here," Elena said softly. "After everything with Marco, this place felt like freedom." "You can keep it if you want." Dante moved to the window, looking out at the rooftops. "Keep it as a studio, a private space. I don't expect you to give up everything just because you're moving to the villa." The offer was generous, but Elena shook her head. "I don't think I need it anymore. That version of me, the one who needed to prove she could survive alone, she's already moving on." She started gathering clothes, makeup, the personal items that marked a space as lived in. Dante helped silently, his large frame seeming almost comical as he carefully folded her dresses and placed them in the suitcase Carlo had brought up. "There's something I need to tell you," Elena said as she packed her books. "About Marco, about our marriage." Dante paused, a sweater in his hands. "You don't owe me explanations about your past." "I know, but I want you to understand why yesterday affected me so much. Why his words cut so deep even though I know they're not true." She sat on the bed, and Dante joined her, giving her his full attention. "When Marco and I met, I was 23. Fresh out of university, working at a museum, full of ideas about art and beauty and meaning." Elena's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "He was charming, attentive. He pursued me relentlessly, made me feel special. Within 6 months, we were married." "What changed?" "Everything. Nothing. I don't know." Elena twisted her hands together. "It was gradual. First little comments about my appearance. 'Are you really going to wear that?' Or, 'Maybe you should skip dessert.' Then criticism of my work, my friends, my interests. He had opinions about everything I did, and somehow I always fell short." Dante's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "I started changing to please him, lost weight, changed my hair, stopped seeing friends he didn't approve of. Quit my museum job because he said it didn't pay enough, took the gallery position because it was more practical. But nothing I did was ever good enough. The goalposts kept moving." "How long did this go on?" 5 years. 5 years of trying to be the woman he wanted, while he drained my savings for his gambling, slept with other women, and blamed me for his unhappiness. And the worst part? Elena's voice cracked slightly. I believed him. I actually believed that if I could just be better, prettier, more agreeable, he'd love me the way he did in the beginning. Elena, the affair with Alessia was what finally broke through the fog. I found messages on his phone, confronted him, and he didn't even try to deny it. He said it was my fault for letting myself go, for not being exciting enough, for being boring in bed. She laughed bitterly. I filed for divorce the next day, but the damage was done. Even free of him, I couldn't shake his voice in my head, telling me I was worthless. Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with controlled anger. If I had known the extent of what he did to you, yesterday would have gone very differently. That's why I didn't tell you everything. I knew you'd want to... Elena gestured vaguely. Do something dramatic. And I was trying to move on, not get revenge. There's a difference between revenge and justice. Dante stood, pacing the small space with restless energy. He systematically destroyed your confidence, stole from you, betrayed you, and then had the audacity to publicly humiliate you months after you'd finally escaped. That's not something that should go unanswered. What are you planning to do? Dante stopped pacing, turning to face her. Nothing that will come back on you. Nothing that will make things harder for you. But Elena, I can't just let this go. Not after what he did, not after what he tried to continue doing yesterday. I don't want you to hurt him. I won't lay a hand on him. Dante's smile was cold. I don't need to. There are other ways to make someone understand they've made a grave mistake. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. Elena Moretti? The voice was female, professional, vaguely familiar. Yes? This is Giulia Rossini from Firenze Oggi. I was hoping to get a comment from you about your relationship with Dante Valieri. Our readers are very interested in learning more about the woman who's captured his attention. Elena's stomach dropped. A reporter, of course. I have no comment. Just a few questions. How did you meet? How long have you been together? Can you confirm the pregnancy rumors? No comment. Elena's hand shook as she ended the call. Immediately the phone rang again. Different number, same type of call. Then another, and another. Give it to me, Dante said, holding out his hand. Elena handed over the phone, watching as he answered the next call. This is Dante Valieri. Elena Moretti will not be giving interviews or statements about our private life. Any journalist who continues to harass her will find themselves dealing with my legal team. Do I make myself clear? He ended the call and powered down the phone. That should slow them down. You can't threaten every reporter in Florence. Watch me. There was no humor in his voice. You're under my protection, Elena. That extends to protecting you from media harassment. They finished packing in silence, Elena's mind spinning. This was her life now, reporters calling, strangers speculating, every move she made potentially ending up online. The privacy she'd treasured was gone, shattered the moment Dante had claimed her on that street. I need air, she said suddenly, feeling the walls of the small apartment closing in. Can we walk for a bit before going back to the villa? Dante studied her face, then nodded. Carlo can take the bags. We'll walk. They ended up in a small park near the Arno, a quiet spot where locals brought their children to play and elderly couples fed the pigeons. Dante kept his hand on the small of Elena's back, a gesture that was becoming familiar, comforting. Talk to me, he said as they found a bench overlooking the river. Tell me what you're thinking. Elena watched the water flow past, gathering her thoughts. I'm thinking that 24 hours ago, I was anonymous. Nobody knew my name or cared about my life. Now I'm Dante Valieri's baby mama, and my face is all over social media. People I've never met have opinions about my worth, my appearance, my motives. And this is just the beginning. Yes, Dante agreed simply. It is. Doesn't that bother you? Knowing that we'll never have real privacy, that people will always be watching, judging, speculating? I've lived with that reality my entire adult life. It's normal to me. He turned slightly to face her. But I understand it's not normal to you, that you didn't choose this level of exposure, and if I could change that, shield you from it somehow, I would. But you can't. No, I can't. His honesty was refreshing, at least. No false promises? No pretending the situation was better than it was. What I can do is make sure you have support, security when you need it, legal protection if anyone crosses lines, and the knowledge that you don't have to face any of this alone. A young mother walked by, pushing a double stroller, two identical babies sleeping peacefully. Elena watched them pass, imagining herself in a few months, trying to navigate the city with twins, dealing with the logistics of diapers and bottles and sleepless nights. Are you afraid? She asked Dante suddenly. About becoming a father? He was quiet for so long that Elena thought he might not answer. Then, terrified. The admission surprised her. Dante always seemed so confident, so sure of himself and his place in the world. I grew up in a world where weakness is exploited, he continued, where showing emotion is dangerous, where trusting the wrong person can get you killed. That's not the world I want for our children, but it's the only world I know how to navigate. So we'll learn a different way together. Elena found his hand, lacing their fingers together. Neither of us knows what we're doing, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out as we go. You make it sound simple. It probably won't be. Probably be messy and complicated and full of mistakes. She managed a smile. But it's our mess, our complications, our mistakes to learn from. Dante lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, almost courtly, completely at odds with his dangerous reputation. "When did you get so wise?" he asked. "Somewhere between the public humiliation and the marriage proposal from a Mafia boss." Elena's tone was dry. Nothing like a little trauma to speed up personal growth. That surprised a genuine laugh out of him, the sound rich and warm. A passing couple glanced over, clearly recognizing Dante, their eyes widening before they hurried away. "See?" Elena said. "Even laughing causes a scene. Let them look, let them whisper. As long as you're beside me, I don't care what anyone else thinks." They sat in silence for a while, watching the river flow and the city go about its business. Elena tried to imagine what her life would look like 6 months from now, a year, 5 years. Would she still feel this strange mix of excitement and terror? Would she grow comfortable with the attention, the scrutiny, the constant awareness of being watched? "There's something else we need to discuss," Dante said eventually. "Something I should have brought up yesterday, but the timing never seemed right." Elena tensed. "What is it?" "My family. They'll need to be told about you, about the babies, and they'll want to meet you." "You have family in Florence?" "Some. My younger sister Kiara lives in Milan, but she visits regularly. My uncle Roberto handles some of the business interests here. There are cousins, associates, people who are family in everything but blood." He paused. "They're going to be curious about you, protective of me. Some of them may not understand why I've chosen to build a life with someone outside our world." "You mean they'll think I'm not good enough for you?" "They'll think I'm putting myself at risk by caring about someone who doesn't understand the complexities of my position," Dante corrected gently. "It's not personal, Elena. It's how they've been taught to think. Trust is earned slowly in my world." "So what do I do? How do I prove I'm worthy of their precious Dante?" He smiled at her sarcasm. "You be yourself. You answer their questions honestly. You show them the same strength and intelligence that drew me to you in the first place. And you let me handle anyone who crosses the line from protective to disrespectful." "When do I have to meet them?" "Soon. Word is already spreading, and it's better they hear details from us than through gossip." He squeezed her hand. "But not today. Today, you've dealt with enough. Today we go back to the villa, you rest, and we pretend the outside world doesn't exist for a few hours." That sounded perfect. Elena stood, letting Dante pull her close for a moment. His arms were solid around her, his heartbeat steady against her ear. This, she thought, this feeling of safety, of being valued, this was worth navigating the complications. They walked back slowly, taking side streets to avoid the tourist crowds. Dante pointed out buildings with interesting histories, shared stories about Florence that only locals knew. It was easy to forget, in moments like these, exactly who he was, what he was capable of. He was just a man who loved his city and wanted to share it with someone special. Carlo was waiting where they'd left him, the car packed with Elena's belongings. The drive back to the villa was quiet, comfortable. Elena watched the city give way to hills, cypress trees, and vineyards. The landscape that had seemed so foreign yesterday was already beginning to feel familiar. At the villa, Maria had prepared lunch. A light pasta with fresh vegetables, crusty bread, a salad from the garden. They ate on the terrace, overlooking the view that Elena was beginning to think she could never tire of. "I need to make some calls," Dante said apologetically as they finished. "Business that can't wait. Will you be all right on your own for a few hours?" "I'll survive," Elena assured him. "I might explore the gardens, maybe read, definitely avoid looking at my phone." He smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead before disappearing into his study. Left alone, Elena wandered through the villa, learning its rhythms and secrets. She discovered a conservatory filled with orchids, a wine cellar that probably held bottles worth more than her yearly salary, a small chapel that clearly hadn't been used in years. But it was the nursery that stopped her cold. The room was on the second floor, not far from what was now her bedroom. It was empty except for dusty furniture covered in white sheets, a crib, a rocking chair, what looked like a changing table. Clearly, this had once been a child's room. Clearly, it had been abandoned. "That was mine." Elena spun to find Dante in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Your room?" "When I was very young, before—" He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. It hasn't been used in almost 30 years, but I thought, perhaps, with some renovation, it could become something new, something happy. Elena moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to reveal a view of the gardens. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "It has good light," she said, "and it's close to my room, close to yours." "We could turn it into 2 rooms," Dante suggested, coming to stand beside her. "One for each baby, or keep it as one large space where they could play together. Whatever you prefer." The image formed in Elena's mind. This dusty, abandoned space transformed into a bright nursery. 2 cribs, soft rugs, toys scattered about, the sound of babies laughing. It seemed almost impossible that in 6 months, that fantasy could be reality. "I'd like them to share a room," she decided, "at least at first, so they're not alone, so they have each other." "Like you had no one." Dante's words were soft, understanding. Elena nodded. "I don't want that for them. I want them to always know they're part of something bigger than themselves, that they belong." "They will, I promise you, Elena. Our children will never doubt that they're loved and wanted and cherished." The intensity in his voice made her turn. Dante was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite name, something fierce and protective and achingly tender all at once. "You're going to be a wonderful father," she said. "I'm going to try." He pulled her close, his hand resting on her stomach where their children grew. "Every day, I'm going to try to be worthy of them, of you." They stood like that for a long moment, in the empty nursery that would soon be full of life, wrapped in possibility and promise. Outside, the Tuscan sun continued its arc across the sky. In the city, people continued to gossip and speculate about Dante Alighieri's mysterious new love. Marco Russo probably continued to nurse his wounded pride and plot whatever petty revenge his small mind could conceive. But here, in this quiet room, with sunlight warming their skin, Elena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. The sound of tires on gravel broke the moment. Dante tensed, his entire posture shifting in a way that reminded Elena of a predator scenting danger. "Stay here," he ordered, already moving toward the window. "What is it?" "Someone just arrived. Someone who doesn't usually come to the villa unannounced." Elena followed him to the window despite his instruction. Below, a sleek sports car had pulled into the drive, bright red, expensive, driven by someone who clearly valued making an entrance. The driver's door opened, and a woman emerged. She was stunning, late 20s, dark hair cascading in perfect waves, designer dress that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent used to be. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of being beautiful and knowing it. "Who is that?" Elena asked, though something in her stomach already knew the answer wouldn't be good. Dante's jaw was tight, his eyes hard. "That's Vittoria Castellano, my ex-fiancée, and she's about to make an already complicated situation significantly worse." Elena's heart sank as she watched Vittoria Castellano stride toward the villa's entrance, with the kind of entitlement that came from someone who'd walked that path many times before. The woman moved like she owned the place, her heels clicking against the stone with sharp, decisive strikes. "You were engaged," Elena said quietly, the words not quite a question. "2 years ago, it ended badly." Dante's voice was clipped, controlled in a way that told Elena there was far more to the story than those few words revealed. "She shouldn't be here. I made it very clear when we ended things that she wasn't welcome at the villa anymore." "Maybe you should go talk to her alone," Elena suggested, even though the thought of Dante facing his beautiful ex-fiancée without her made something twist painfully in her chest. "I can stay up here, out of the way." Dante turned to her, his expression fierce. "No. You're not hiding like you're something to be ashamed of. You're the mother of my children, and this is your home now. If Vittoria has something to say, she can say it in front of both of us." Before Elena could argue, they heard the front door open downstairs, followed by Vittoria's voice ringing through the villa. "Dante! Darling, I know you're here. Your car is in the drive, and I saw movement in the upstairs windows. Don't make me come find you. You know I will." The familiarity in her tone made Elena's skin prickle. This was a woman who knew Dante intimately, who'd navigated this villa countless times, who probably knew which floorboard creaked on the stairs and which room had the best morning light. Dante's hand found Elena's, his grip reassuring. "Together," he said firmly. We face this together." They descended the stairs to find Vittoria standing in the entrance hall, examining her manicured nails with studied casualness. Up close, she was even more striking. Flawless olive skin, eyes the color of espresso, lips painted a perfect crimson. Everything about her screamed money, breeding, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. When she looked up and saw them, her eyes went immediately to Elena with an assessment so thorough and dismissive it felt like a physical blow. "So it's true," Vittoria said, her voice carrying just enough surprise to be insulting. "The great Dante Valieri, brought low by a mousy little gallery girl with a convenient pregnancy. I had to see it with my own eyes to believe it." "Vittoria!" Dante's voice was ice. "You need to leave. Now." "Oh, don't be dramatic, darling. I drove all the way from Milan when I heard the news. Surely you can spare me a few minutes of your precious time." Her eyes never left Elena. "I wanted to meet the woman who's accomplished what I couldn't, trapping you with babies. Very clever, really. I should have thought of it myself." Elena felt her face burning, but before she could respond, Dante stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of her. "Watch your words very carefully," he said, his tone carrying a warning that made even Vittoria pause. "Elena is my guest, and she will be treated with respect in my home. If you can't manage that, the door is behind you." Vittoria's perfect lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Guest? Is that what we're calling her? How charmingly diplomatic." She moved further into the hall, her gaze sweeping over the familiar surroundings. "Though I notice she's not wearing a ring. Interesting. I would have thought you'd at least make an honest woman of her before parading her around as the mother of your children." "My relationship with Elena is none of your concern." "Of course it is, darling. Everything about you concerns me. We were supposed to build an empire together, remember? Unite our families, strengthen our position, then you threw it all away because I made one tiny mistake." "You slept with my business partner," Dante said flatly. "In my bed." "That's not a tiny mistake, Vittoria. That's a betrayal." Elena felt her eyebrows rise. So that was how the engagement had ended. Suddenly, Vittoria's confidence made more sense. She was someone who believed charm could smooth over anything, even infidelity. Vittoria waved a dismissive hand. "Ancient history. I was young and foolish. But we could have worked through it if you hadn't been so rigid, so unforgiving." Her eyes cut back to Elena. "Let me guess. You think you're different? You think you found the real Dante beneath all that power and control? How adorable." "Stop talking to her," Dante ordered. "In fact, stop talking altogether. Whatever you came here to say it to me." "Fine." Vittoria's mask of charm cracked slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "I came to warn you. The families are talking, Dante. They're concerned about this sudden relationship with an outsider. A nobody with no connections, no family worth mentioning, no understanding of our world. They think you're making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. Let them think what they want. You can't just dismiss their concerns. You have responsibilities, obligations to people who've supported you for years. And now you're risking all of that for what? A woman you barely know who happened to get pregnant?" Elena had heard enough. She stepped forward, ignoring Dante's protective instinct to shield her. "You don't know anything about me or our relationship. You're making assumptions based on gossip and your own bitterness." Vittoria's laugh was sharp. "Oh, she has a voice. How refreshing. Tell me, Elena. Is it Elena, isn't it? What exactly do you bring to this relationship besides a convenient pregnancy? What value do you add to Dante's life?" The question hit all of Elena's insecurities, every doubt that had plagued her since yesterday. What did she bring to Dante's world? What could she possibly offer a man who had everything? But before the old Elena, the one Marco had spent years diminishing, could surface and make her feel small, a different voice emerged, stronger, clearer, fed up with being told she wasn't enough. "I bring myself," Elena said quietly, "my thoughts, my opinions, my art history degree that lets me have actual conversations about something other than power and money. I bring honesty, because I don't want anything from Dante except his respect and his partnership in raising our children. And I bring the one thing you clearly couldn't, loyalty." Vittoria's eyes flashed with anger, but Elena wasn't finished. "You come here talking about value and connections and family obligations, but what you're really talking about is transactions. Relationships built on what people can do for each other rather than who they are. Maybe that works in your world, but it's not the world I want for my children. And apparently it's not the world Dante wants either, or he wouldn't have chosen me. For a moment, the hall was silent, except for the ticking of an antique clock somewhere in the depths of the villa. Vittoria stared at Elena like she was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her instead of just dismissing her as an obstacle. Then she turned to Dante. You've made your choice then. You're actually serious about this. About her. Yes, Dante said simply. I am. Then you're a fool. The families won't accept her. Your uncle Roberto certainly won't. He's already making noise about this being a distraction, about you losing focus on what matters. Elena and our children are what matter now. Vittoria's expression shifted, something like genuine hurt flickering across her perfect features. I loved you, you know. Despite everything, despite the way it ended, I did love you. Or at least I loved what we could have been together. But you loved the idea of power more, Dante said, not unkindly. You loved the status, the influence, the doors that being my wife would open. You never loved me, Vittoria. You loved what I represented. And you think she's different? Vittoria gestured at Elena. You think she won't eventually want the same things? The lifestyle, the luxury, the power that comes with your name? I think she's already proven she's different by walking away from everything she knew to protect our children from a world she thought was too dangerous. I think she's different because she was planning to raise them alone rather than trap me into a relationship I didn't want. Dante moved to stand beside Elena, his hand finding hers. And I think she's different because when I look at her, I see a partner, not a trophy. The words settled over the hall like a benediction. Vittoria studied them both, her expression unreadable. Well, she said finally, smoothing her dress with deliberate care, I suppose there's nothing left to say except good luck. You're going to need it when the families start pushing back. When your uncle demands you choose between your legacy and this, she gestured vaguely at Elena, domesticity, when the reality of trying to blend your world with hers becomes impossible to navigate. I'll handle my family, Dante said. And Vittoria, don't come back here. This is the last time I'm going to be polite about it. For just a second, Vittoria's composure cracked completely, revealing raw pain underneath. You really have moved on. I thought maybe, with time, you'd forgive me, that we could find our way back to each other. That was never going to happen. Not after what you did, not after the trust you broke. You need to accept that and move forward with your own life. Vittoria nodded once, sharply, then turned on her heel and walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back one last time. For what it's worth, she said, her eyes on Elena, I hope you know how lucky you are. Dante doesn't give his heart easily, and he certainly doesn't forgive easily. The fact that he's willing to build a life with you, to trust you with his children, that's not something he offers lightly. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a solid thunk that seemed to echo through the villa. They heard her car start, tires crunching on gravel as she drove away, taking her bitterness and warnings with her. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline from the confrontation making her knees feel weak. Are you all right? Dante asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I told off your ex-fiancé. Your beautiful, sophisticated, connected ex-fiancé. Elena laughed shakily. I'm either very brave or very stupid. You were magnificent. Dante pulled her close, his arms solid and reassuring around her. The way you stood up to her, refused to be diminished. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life. She's right, though, isn't she? About your family? They're not going to be happy about this. About me. Dante pulled back enough to look at her face, his expression serious. Some of them won't be. My uncle Roberto especially. He's old-fashioned, believes in strategic marriages and maintaining bloodlines. But Elena, their approval isn't required. Their acceptance would be nice, but it's not necessary for us to build a life together. Easy for you to say. You're used to people disapproving and not caring. I'm used to trying to make everyone happy and failing anyway. Then maybe it's time to stop trying. Maybe it's time to focus on what makes you happy instead of what makes other people comfortable. It sounded simple when he said it like that, but Elena knew the reality would be far more complicated. Dante's world operated on rules she didn't understand, expectations she couldn't meet, judgments she couldn't predict. Vittoria had been right about one thing: the families would push back. The question was whether Elena was strong enough to withstand that pressure. "Tell me about your uncle," she said, needing to understand what they were facing. "What should I expect when I meet him?" Dante led her to the sitting room, settling them both on a sofa that probably cost more than a car. "Roberto Valieri is my father's younger brother. When my father died, Roberto stepped in to help manage certain aspects of the business. He's smart, ruthless, and completely devoted to preserving the Valieri legacy, which doesn't include a nobody from a failed marriage with no family connections." His words, not mine. But yes, that's essentially his position. He believes I should marry someone like Vittoria, connected, sophisticated, from a family that understands our world, someone who can be an asset rather than a liability. And he's going to make his opinions very clear when he finds out about me. He already knows. I called him this morning after you fell asleep, told him about you, about the pregnancy, about my intentions. Dante's jaw tightened. He's demanding a meeting tomorrow. He wants to meet you and assess whether you're suitable. Elena felt her stomach drop. Assess me? Like I'm a business investment? That's exactly how he sees it. In Roberto's world, everything is a transaction. Relationships, marriages, friendships, they all serve a purpose, advance an agenda. The idea of marrying for love is foreign to him. Did he love your aunt, his wife? She died when I was young, and honestly, I don't know if he loved her or if it was just another strategic alliance. Dante's expression was distant, remembering. My parents were different. They actually cared for each other, built something real. My father used to say that my mother was the only person who saw him as more than his position, more than his power. I think that's why her death destroyed him the way it did. It was the most Dante had shared about his parents, about his childhood. Elena filed the information away, understanding that these glimpses into his past were rare and precious. How did she die? Your mother? Cancer, aggressive, brutal, gone within 6 months of diagnosis. I was 14. His voice was carefully neutral, the way people sounded when discussing traumas they'd learned to lock away. My father never really recovered. He went through the motions, ran the businesses, maintained appearances, but the heart went out of him. He died 5 years later, officially from a heart attack, but I think he just gave up. Didn't want to keep going without her. Elena's hand found his, squeezing gently. I'm sorry, that must have been impossibly hard. It taught me that love is dangerous, that caring too much gives other people power over you. For years, I swore I'd never put myself in that position, never let anyone matter enough to break me the way my mother's death broke my father. And now? Dante looked at her, his dark eyes intense. Now I'm starting to understand why he thought it was worth it, why he'd have chosen those years with her, even knowing how it would end. Because the alternative, going through life alone, never connecting, never risking, that's not really living at all. The moment stretched between them, heavy with meaning. Elena felt the weight of what he wasn't saying, the vulnerability he was showing her beneath the protective layers of power and control. A knock at the door broke the spell. Maria appeared, looking apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Valieri, but you have a phone call. Your uncle. He says it's urgent. Dante's expression shuddered, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the powerful one. Tell him I'll call him back. He says it can't wait. Something about tomorrow's meeting being moved up. Maria hesitated. He sounded quite insistent. Dante swore under his breath, then looked at Elena. I need to take this. Will you be all right for a few minutes? Of course. I'll just... Elena gestured vaguely at the villa around them. Explore. Get more familiar with my new home. After Dante left, Elena wandered through the villa with no particular destination in mind. She found herself in the library, drawn to the floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books in multiple languages. Some were clearly valuable, leather-bound first editions, rare volumes that belonged in museums. Others were more practical, business texts, legal references, histories of Florence and Tuscany. But it was a smaller shelf in the corner that caught her attention. Children's books, worn from reading, spines cracked from being opened again and again. Fairy tales, adventure stories, classics like Pinocchio and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. These had been loved, cherished, read until the pages were soft. Dante's books, she realized, from when he was young, before his mother died, before he learned to lock his heart away. She pulled out one, an Italian translation of Where the Wild Things Are, and flipped through the pages. In the margin of one page, in a child's careful handwriting, Mama says everyone needs a place where they can be wild sometimes. Papa says I already am wild. The note made Elena's throat tight. She could picture it, a young Dante, dark-haired and serious even then, writing comments in his books while his mother smiled nearby. A version of Dante who still believed in wild things and safe returns home. Those were my favorites. Elena jumped, not having heard him approach. Dante stood in the doorway, his expression soft as he looked at the book in her hands. Your mother read to you, Elena said. Every night. Even when she was sick, even when she could barely sit up, she'd have me bring her books and read to me. Said it was important to keep imagination alive, even in dark times. He moved closer, taking the book gently from her hands. After she died, I couldn't read them anymore. It hurt too much, remembering her voice doing all the different character sounds. But you kept them. I kept everything of hers. Her books, her jewelry, her art. I couldn't throw any of it away, even when my father wanted to, even when it felt like keeping them was just preserving the pain. He set the book back on the shelf carefully, reverently. Maybe I was waiting for a reason to bring them back out, for children who could love them the way I did. The image formed in Elena's mind. Dante reading to their twins, doing character voices, keeping his mother's tradition alive for a new generation. It was so domestic, so tender, so at odds with everything the world thought they knew about Dante Alighieri. What did your uncle want? Elena asked, pulling them back to the present. Dante's expression hardened. He's moving the meeting to tonight. Insists we come to his house in the city for dinner. Says if you're going to be part of this family, you need to understand what that means, and the sooner the better. Tonight? As in, a few hours from now? He's not a patient man, and he likes to keep people off balance, force them to react without time to prepare. Dante's jaw tightened. But I told him tomorrow at the earliest. You need time to rest, to settle in. This meeting happens on our terms, not his. What did he say to that? That I was already letting you influence my decisions, putting your comfort above family obligations, that this proves his concerns about your impact on my judgment. Dante's voice was tight with controlled anger. He's testing me, seeing if I'll choose you over his demands, trying to establish dominance before you've even met. Elena sank into one of the library's leather chairs, suddenly exhausted. This is going to be my life now, isn't it? People testing me, judging whether I'm worthy, watching for signs that I'm changing you or weakening you or whatever it is they're afraid of. Yes, Dante said honestly, pulling up a chair to face her. That's exactly what it's going to be like. At least at first, until you prove yourself. Until they learn that dismissing you is a mistake. And if I can't prove myself, if I'm not strong enough to stand up to people like your uncle or Vittoria or whoever else decides I'm not good enough, Dante leaned forward, taking her hands in his. Then I stand up for you. I make it clear that disrespecting you means disrespecting me, and I use every bit of power and influence I have to protect you from people who want to tear you down. I don't want you to have to fight your own family because of me. Elena, I've spent my entire adult life navigating family politics, managing egos, balancing competing interests. This is nothing new. The only difference is that now I'm doing it for something that actually matters to me rather than just maintaining power for its own sake. A thought occurred to Elena, uncomfortable but necessary. What if they're right? What if I do change you, make you soft or distracted or whatever they're worried about? What if being with me puts you at risk? Being with you has already changed me, Dante said simply. Made me think about the future differently. Made me want things I'd convinced myself didn't matter. If that's softness, then I'll embrace it. And as for risk, his smile was sharp, dangerous. Anyone foolish enough to mistake love for weakness is in for a very unpleasant education. There was steel beneath his words, a reminder that the man holding her hand so gently was the same man who'd made Marco kneel in the street. Dante might be choosing softness with her, but he hadn't forgotten how to be hard when necessary. So what do we do about tomorrow? Elena asked. How do I prepare to meet your uncle and convince him I'm not going to destroy everything he's built? You don't try to convince him of anything. You be yourself, intelligent, honest, strong. You answer his questions without apologizing for who you are or where you came from. Dante squeezed her hands. And you remember that his approval, while it would make things easier, isn't required for us to be together. I chose you, Elena. That choice doesn't change based on what Roberto or anyone else thinks. Easy to say now. Harder when we're sitting in his house with him listing all the reasons I'm wrong for you. Then we'll face it together, like we faced Marco, like we faced Vittoria. He pulled her to her feet, into his arms. You're not alone in this anymore. Whatever comes, we handle it as a team. Elena rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Outside the library windows, the afternoon light was fading toward evening, painting the Tuscan hills in shades of gold and amber. In 12 hours or so, she'd be sitting across from Roberto Valieri, being assessed like a business investment, judged on criteria she didn't fully understand. The thought terrified her, but standing here in Dante's arms, surrounded by books that had once been loved by a boy who still believed in wild things and safe returns home, Elena felt something else too. Determination. She'd survived Marco's systematic destruction of her confidence. She'd survived yesterday's public humiliation and turned it into the beginning of something new. She'd stood up to Vittoria Castellano and refused to be dismissed. She could survive one dinner with Dante's disapproving uncle. Tell me about the rest of your family, Elena said, pulling back to look at Dante's face. Your sister, your cousins, who else am I going to have to win over? Dante's expression softened at the mention of his sister. Kiara is 3 years younger than me. She lives in Milan with her husband and their daughter. He paused, searching for words. The best of our family. Kind, genuine, untouched by the politics and power games that consume the rest of us. You'll like her. Will she like me? She'll love you. Kiara has been telling me for years that I need someone who sees past the reputation, who challenges me instead of just agreeing with everything I say. When I told her about you this morning, her exact words were, finally, something interesting. That made Elena smile despite her nerves. So I have at least one ally. You have me, Dante corrected, and Maria already adores you. I can tell by the way she's been fussing over your breakfast and making sure your room is perfect. Carlo respects anyone I respect. Kiara will be delighted. The rest, he shrugged, they'll come around or they won't. Either way, it doesn't change what we're building here. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for tomorrow, Dante coaching Elena on what to expect from Roberto. The kinds of questions he'd ask, the traps he'd set, the ways he'd try to unsettle her. It felt like studying for an exam where the stakes were her entire future. Maria prepared dinner, a simple pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil that tasted like summer. They ate on the terrace as the sun set, the sky turning impossible shades of pink and orange. For a few hours, it was easy to pretend they were just a normal couple enjoying a quiet evening rather than preparing for battle with disapproving family members. Later, as Elena prepared for bed in her beautiful room with its view of the gardens, her phone buzzed. She'd been avoiding it all day, dreading the accumulation of messages and notifications. But curiosity finally won. Most of the messages were from acquaintances, former coworkers, casual friends, people she'd lost touch with after the divorce. They all wanted the same thing, confirmation that the rumors were true, details about her relationship with Dante, explanations for how she'd managed to land Florence's most eligible bachelor. But one message stood out, from an unknown number sent just an hour ago. Enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts. People like you don't belong in Dante's world, and sooner or later everyone will see that, including him. Elena stared at the message, her hands suddenly cold. It could be anyone. Vittoria, Marco, some random person who'd seen her photo online and decided they didn't like her face. The anonymity made it worse somehow, the faceless malice more unsettling than a direct threat. She should tell Dante, should show him the message and let him handle it the way he handled everything else, with swift, decisive action. But part of her hesitated. He was already dealing with his uncle's disapproval, his family's concerns, the complications of merging their two worlds. Did he really need to add stalker messages to the list? A knock at her door interrupted the debate. Dante stood in the hallway, changed into comfortable clothes, soft cotton pants, and a t-shirt that revealed the lean muscle of his arms. Can't sleep? He asked. Nervous about tomorrow, I guess. Elena set her phone down, screen side down. How do you not get overwhelmed by all of this? The family politics, the expectations, the constant need to prove yourself? I grew up with it. It's normal to me. He moved into the room, his eyes taking in her tense posture. But I remember what it was like the first time I had to face down my father's business associates. I was 19, barely knew what I was doing, terrified of saying the wrong thing and undermining everything he'd built. What happened? I said the wrong thing, made a mistake that cost us a significant deal. My father was furious. Dante settled into the chair by her window, his expression distant with memory. But afterwards, he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail sometimes. The question is whether you learn from it or let it break you." Did you learn? Eventually, after a few more failures and a lot of bruised ego, his smile was rueful. The point is, Elena, you don't have to be perfect tomorrow. You just have to be willing to try, to stand up for yourself, to show Roberto that you're not someone who breaks easily. The rest will come with time. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the confidence he seemed to have in her abilities. But the message on her phone kept nagging at her, a reminder that not everyone wanted her to succeed. "Dante," she said hesitantly, "if someone was threatening me, not physically, but with words, trying to undermine my confidence or make me feel unwelcome, would you want to know?" His entire demeanor changed, the relaxed man replaced by someone alert and dangerous. "What happened? Did someone contact you?" She showed him the message, watching his expression darken as he read it. "This number isn't in your contacts." "No, I have no idea who sent it." Dante's jaw tightened, that cold fury she'd seen on the street settling over his features. "I'll have it traced. Find out who thinks they can threaten you without consequences." "It's just words. They probably don't even mean it." "Words can be weapons, Elena, and anyone using them against you needs to understand that there will be repercussions." He stood, pulling out his own phone. "I'm going to make some calls. Get this handled tonight so you don't have to worry about it tomorrow." "Dante, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. "This is what I mean when I say you're under my protection. Not just from physical threats, but from anyone who wants to make you feel small or afraid or unwelcome. You're mine now, Elena, and I protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should probably have bothered her, should have set off warning bells about control and ownership, but instead, it made her feel safe, valued, like she mattered enough to defend. After Dante left to make his calls, Elena finally crawled into bed, exhaustion catching up with her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, new opportunities to prove herself or fail spectacularly. But tonight, in this beautiful room, in this impossible villa, she let herself rest. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of 2 small heartbeats, growing steadily inside her. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever challenges she faced, she was doing this for them. For the chance to give her children a life built on love and respect rather than criticism and contempt. That was worth facing down any number of disapproving uncles. Morning arrived too quickly, sunlight streaming through Elena's windows with the kind of cheerful intensity that felt inappropriate for someone facing what amounted to a tribunal. She'd slept poorly, dreams filled with faceless judges, and impossible tests she couldn't pass. Maria brought breakfast at 8, along with news that made Elena's stomach clench. "Mr. Valieri asked me to tell you the meeting with his uncle has been moved to 11 this morning," the housekeeper said, setting down a tray of food Elena suddenly had no appetite for. "He said to take your time getting ready, but that Carlo will have the car ready at 10:30. So Roberto had won that particular battle, forcing them to move on his timeline rather than theirs. Elena wondered what other small victories he'd claimed before the day was done. She forced herself to eat, knowing the babies needed nourishment. Even if her nerves were demanding, she skipped food entirely. Then she stood in front of her closet, now filled with clothes Maria had somehow procured overnight, trying to decide what one wore to meet a disapproving Mafia uncle. Too formal would seem like she was trying too hard. Too casual would be disrespectful. Too expensive would look like she was spending Dante's money already. Too cheap would confirm their suspicions that she was beneath their world. Finally, she chose a simple navy dress, elegant but not ostentatious, fitted but not tight enough to emphasize her small baby bump. She paired it with minimal jewelry and low heels, aiming for respectful and competent rather than trying to compete with women like Vittoria. Dante found her in front of the mirror, attempting to tame her hair into something sophisticated. "You look beautiful," he said, coming to stand behind her. "I look terrified." Elena met his eyes in the reflection, which is probably accurate. Roberto is going to try to intimidate you. It's what he does, finds weaknesses and exploits them. But Elena, you need to remember something important. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. He needs me more than I need him. He manages certain business interests, yes, but ultimately, I'm the one with the final say. His power exists because I allow it to exist. So why are we going at all? Why give him this meeting if you don't need his approval? Because despite everything, he's family. Because he did step up when my father died and I was too young to handle everything alone. Because maintaining these relationships, even difficult ones, is part of how I keep my world stable. Dante's expression was serious. But make no mistake, if he crosses a line, if he disrespects you beyond what's tolerable, I will put him in his place, family or not. They drove into Florence in tense silence, the city's beauty lost on Elena as her mind spun through worst-case scenarios. Roberto's house was in one of the oldest parts of the city, a Renaissance palazzo that had probably housed nobility for centuries. The kind of place that screamed old money, old power, old families who'd been making decisions that shaped Florence since before America existed. Carlo pulled up to an imposing wooden door set into a stone facade. A man in a dark suit, security, Elena realized, opened it before they'd even exited the car. "Mr. Valieri," the man said with a respectful nod. "Mr. Roberto is expecting you in the library." Inside, the palazzo was exactly what Elena had feared. All marble floors and priceless artwork and furniture that belonged in museums. Their footsteps echoed as they followed the security guard through corridors that felt designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. The library was on the second floor, a vast room lined with leather-bound books and dominated by an enormous desk. Behind that desk sat Roberto Valieri, and Elena understood immediately why Dante had warned her. Roberto was in his late 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that revealed nothing unless he wanted it to. He wore a perfectly tailored suit despite being in his own home, and when he looked up as they entered, his gaze went straight to Elena with an assessment that felt like being X-rayed. "Dante," he said, standing, "punctual as always. I appreciate that you understand the importance of this meeting." "Roberto." Dante's voice was carefully neutral. "This is Elena Moretti." "Elena, my uncle Roberto Valieri." Roberto moved around the desk, and Elena forced herself to stand tall, to meet his eyes without flinching. He was evaluating her, she knew, cataloging every detail from her modest dress to her unadorned hands to the way she stood slightly behind Dante's protective presence. "Miss Moretti." He didn't offer his hand, which felt like a deliberate slight. "I've heard quite a bit about you in the past few days. The whole city is talking, as I'm sure you're aware." "I'm aware," Elena said, pleased that her voice came out steady. "Please, sit." Roberto gestured to chairs arranged in front of his desk, the position of supplicants rather than equals. Another power play, another subtle reminder of who held authority in this room. Dante sat without hesitation, and Elena followed his lead. She could feel the weight of Roberto's attention, the way he was cataloging her every movement, every expression. "I'll be direct," Roberto said, settling back into his chair with the ease of someone completely comfortable with his own authority. "I don't approve of this relationship. I think you're a distraction Dante doesn't need, a complication that serves no strategic purpose, and a potential weakness that enemies could exploit." The bluntness was almost refreshing after all the veiled insults and careful dancing around the point. Elena appreciated knowing exactly where she stood, even if that position was firmly in the crosshairs. "I understand your concerns," Elena said before Dante could respond. "From your perspective, I'm an unknown variable, someone with no connections, no family worth mentioning, no understanding of your world. I'm not offended by your assessment because I know it's accurate." Roberto's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his impassive expression. "At least you're realistic about your position." "But being realistic doesn't mean accepting your judgment as final," Elena continued, her heart pounding, but her voice remaining steady. "Yes, I'm new to this world. Yes, I don't have the connections or background someone like Vittoria Castellano has, but I also don't come with her baggage, her betrayals, or her agenda. Vittoria made a mistake, Roberto said dismissively, one that could have been forgiven and managed if Dante hadn't been so rigid about it. She slept with his business partner in his own bed, Elena said flatly. That's not a mistake, Mr. Valieri. That's a choice. A betrayal of trust that would be unforgivable in any relationship, strategic marriage or not. Dante's hand found hers under the desk, squeezing gently. Support and maybe a little surprise at her directness. Roberto leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. You have opinions. That's dangerous in our world, Miss Moretti. Women who speak their minds tend to create complications. With respect, sir, I think women who speak their minds tend to create complications for men who prefer compliance over partnership. And if Dante wanted someone who'd simply agree with everything he said, he wouldn't have chosen me. For a long moment, the library was silent, except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. Roberto's expression was unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Not approval exactly, but perhaps a grudging acknowledgement that she wasn't going to be as easy to dismiss as he'd expected. Tell me about your family, Roberto said, changing tactics. Your background. What does your father do? This was the trap Elena had been expecting. The questions designed to highlight exactly how far beneath Dante's world she existed. My father was a teacher, she said honestly. High school literature. He died when I was in university. My mother remarried and moved to England with her new husband. We're not particularly close. No siblings? No. And your ex-husband, the man who was publicly berating you in the street? Roberto's tone made it clear he'd done his research. What can you tell me about that relationship? Elena felt her face flush, but she refused to look away. Marco Russo was a mistake I made when I was young and naive. I thought love meant compromise and sacrifice. I learned eventually that what I was calling love was actually just accepting abuse. When I finally found the courage to leave, I did. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago, leaving you conveniently free to pursue a relationship with my nephew. Leaving me free to focus on rebuilding my life, Elena corrected. Dante was not part of my plan. Of meeting him, caring about him, discovering I was pregnant, none of that was strategy or convenience. It was just life being messy and complicated and surprising. Roberto's fingers drummed on his desk, a rhythmic sound that felt like a countdown to judgment. You're pregnant with twins, I understand. Due in approximately 6 months. Yes. And you expect my nephew to marry you? To legitimize these children and give them his name? The question was designed to make her look grasping, opportunistic. But Elena had learned from Vittoria's visit, the best defense was honesty. I expect nothing except that Dante will be a father to his children. Everything else, marriage, living arrangements, the shape of our relationship, those are things we're figuring out together. I'm not here demanding anything from him or from you. I'm here because Dante wanted me to meet his family, and I'm trying to be respectful of that, even though it's clear you've already decided I'm not worthy. You're right, Roberto said bluntly. I have decided you're not worthy. You lack the breeding, the connections, the understanding of our world that a woman in your position should have. You're a liability that could be exploited, a weakness that enemies will target, a distraction from the responsibilities Dante has to this family. Each word was designed to cut, to reinforce Elena's deepest insecurities. And they worked. She felt herself shrinking, the old patterns of accepting criticism and believing she deserved it starting to reassert themselves. Then Dante spoke, his voice carrying an edge of steel Elena had only heard once before, on the street when he'd made Marco kneel. That's enough, Roberto. The older man's eyes shifted to his nephew, evaluating this new development. I'm simply being honest about the situation. No, you're being cruel. There's a difference between expressing legitimate concerns and deliberately trying to undermine someone's confidence. Dante's hand tightened on Elena's. You've made your position clear. You don't approve. You think Elena is beneath our world and that I'm making a mistake. I've heard you. Now hear me. Roberto's expression hardened, but he remained silent. Elena is carrying my children, Dante continued, his voice controlled but carrying absolute authority. That makes her family, whether you approve or not. And when you disrespect her, you disrespect me and the future heirs to this family. So you have a choice to make, Uncle. You can accept that my personal life is my own to navigate, offer whatever support you're capable of, and maintain the relationship we've had. Or you can continue down this path and discover exactly how much patience I have for people who try to tear down the woman I've chosen. The threat was clear, though never explicitly stated. Roberto heard it. Elena could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of how far he could push before Dante's tolerance ran out. "You're willing to risk everything for her?" Roberto asked quietly. "The family's position, the business relationships that depend on strategic alliances, the respect of people who matter in our world." "I'm willing to risk your approval for her," Dante corrected. "The rest will manage itself. And Roberto, you should know something about Elena that you clearly haven't grasped yet. She's not some delicate flower who needs protecting from harsh truths. She survived a marriage that would have broken most people. She walked away from a man who spent years destroying her confidence and rebuilt herself from nothing. She stood up to Vittoria Castellano yesterday and refused to be diminished. She's sitting here now, listening to you systematically attack her character, and she hasn't broken or run away or begged for mercy." Elena felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she blinked them back. Dante's faith in her, his fierce defense, his refusal to let his uncle's words go unanswered, it was almost overwhelming. Roberto studied them both for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, something like respect flickered across his features. "Perhaps I've been approaching this wrong," he said slowly. "Perhaps instead of listing why Miss Moretti is unsuitable, I should be asking what she brings to this family beyond children and complications." It was a small concession, barely a shift in position, but it was something. Elena recognized the olive branch for what it was. Not acceptance, but a willingness to listen. "I bring honesty," Elena said, finding her voice again. "I bring perspective from outside your world, which means I can see things you might miss. I bring art expertise that could be valuable for authenticating and acquiring pieces. I bring loyalty to Dante and our children that isn't based on power or position, but on genuine care. And I bring a willingness to learn, to adapt, to do whatever's necessary to protect this family I'm becoming part of." "Pretty words," Roberto said. "But words are easy. Actions are what matter." "Then judge me on my actions over time, rather than dismissing me based on assumptions today," Elena challenged. "Give me the chance to prove I'm more than you think I am." Roberto's fingers resumed their drumming, that rhythmic countdown. Elena held her breath, aware that whatever came next would set the tone for her relationship with Dante's family going forward. "Very well," Roberto said finally. "I'll reserve final judgment. But understand something, Miss Moretti. If you become a liability, if your presence creates problems that threaten this family's position, I will not hesitate to act. Dante may be willing to overlook potential issues because of his feelings for you, but I am not so sentimental." "I understand," Elena said, even though the threat sent ice through her veins. "Good." Roberto stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Dante, a word alone before you leave." It was phrased as a request, but delivered as a command. Dante looked at Elena, asking silent permission. She nodded, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I'll wait in the hall," she said, standing. The security guard who'd led them in appeared to escort her out. Elena followed him, acutely aware of the conversation she wasn't privy to happening behind closed doors. What was Roberto saying to Dante? What other concerns or threats was he voicing without her there to defend herself? The hallway outside the library felt oppressively silent, decorated with portraits of stern-faced Villieris, who'd probably all had opinions about who was worthy to join their bloodline. Elena studied them, trying to find any warmth in those painted faces and finding none. "They're rather intimidating, aren't they?" Elena spun to find a woman emerging from a nearby room. She was in her mid-30s, elegantly dressed in a way that suggested money without ostentation. Her smile was warm, genuine, completely at odds with the cold assessment Elena had just endured. "The portraits, I mean," the woman continued, gesturing at the paintings. "All these serious faces judging you. Roberto hung them specifically to make people uncomfortable. It's very on-brand for him." Do you work here?" Elena asked, uncertain of this woman's connection to the household. The woman laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Work here? No, I'm Kiara, Dante's sister. I heard you were coming today and couldn't resist driving in from Milan to meet the woman who's caused such an uproar in our family. Kiara, Dante's sister, the one he'd said was kind and genuine. Relief flooded through Elena. I'm Elena, she said, though clearly Kiara already knew that. I know exactly who you are. The whole family knows. You're all anyone's talking about. Kiara linked her arm through Elena's like they were old friends. Come on, let's get you away from Uncle Roberto's house of horrors. I know a cafe nearby where we can talk without feeling like we're being surveyed by dead ancestors. I should wait for Dante. He'll find us. Trust me, when my brother and Roberto get going, they can argue for hours. Besides, I have questions, and I suspect you could use an ally who isn't going to interrogate you about your bloodline. Kiara's eyes were kind, understanding. Please, I promise I'm much nicer than the rest of the family. Elena hesitated, but something about Kiara's warmth, her easy manner, made the decision simple. Okay, but I should at least tell someone where I'm going. Kiara spoke briefly to the security guard, who nodded and disappeared back into the library, presumably to inform Dante. Then she led Elena down the stairs and out into the Florence sunshine. The cafe was exactly as promised. Small, quiet, the kind of neighborhood spot tourists rarely discovered. Kiara ordered them both coffee and cornetti, ignoring Elena's protest that she shouldn't be drinking caffeine. One small coffee won't hurt the babies, Kiara said with the confidence of someone who'd been through pregnancy. And you look like you need it after facing down Roberto. How bad was it? On a scale of 1 to soul-crushing, probably a 7. Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup. He made it very clear he doesn't think I'm suitable for Dante or this family. Of course he doesn't. You're not from our world. You didn't come with pre-negotiated alliances, and you make Dante happy, which Roberto finds deeply suspicious. Kiara's tone was matter-of-fact. My uncle believes love is a weakness, and that all relationships should serve a strategic purpose. The idea that Dante would choose someone based on actual feeling rather than family benefit offends his entire worldview. So he's never going to accept me. I didn't say that. Roberto is rigid and controlling and absolutely exhausting to deal with, but he's not stupid. If you prove yourself valuable, if you show him you can navigate our world without becoming a liability, he'll grudgingly admit you have worth. Kiara took a sip of her coffee. It won't be easy, and he'll never love you, but you can earn his respect. That's the best any of us can hope for with Roberto. Elena studied Dante's sister, trying to reconcile this warm, open woman with the cold, calculating family she'd been imagining. How are you so different from them? From Roberto and the others? I got out, Kiara said simply. Married a man my uncle didn't approve of, a doctor, completely outside our world, and moved to Milan, created a life that's mine instead of just an extension of family obligations. Roberto barely speaks to me now, which honestly feels like a gift. But you're here today. Because Dante called and asked me to come. Said you might need someone in your corner who understood what it's like to be the outsider everyone's judging. Kiara's smile was gentle. My brother loves you, Elena. I can hear it in his voice when he talks about you. And Dante doesn't love easily or carelessly. So whatever Roberto or anyone else thinks, you've already accomplished something remarkable. The words loosened something in Elena's chest that had been tight since yesterday's confrontation with Marco. Here was someone who understood, who'd been through similar trials, who'd survived and built a happy life despite the family's disapproval. Tell me the truth, Elena said. Can this actually work? Can someone like me build a life with someone like Dante without it all falling apart? Kiara considered the question seriously. Honestly, I don't know. What Dante does, the world he operates in, it's complicated and dangerous in ways I don't think either of us fully understands. There will be challenges, people who test you, situations where you'll feel completely out of your depth. That's not very reassuring. But Kiara continued, I also know my brother. When he commits to something, he commits completely. If he's chosen you, if he's decided you and those babies are his future, he'll move heaven and earth to make it work. The question isn't whether Dante is strong enough to protect you. It's whether you're strong enough to stand beside him rather than behind him. Elena thought about that as she sipped her coffee. Standing beside Dante meant accepting his world, learning its rules, becoming someone who could navigate its complexities. It meant growing into a version of herself she couldn't quite imagine yet. Stronger, harder, more capable of handling the darkness that came with his power. I want to be, she said finally. Strong enough, I mean. I want our children to grow up seeing a partnership, not a protector and someone who constantly needs protecting. But I don't know how to get there from here. One step at a time, Kiara suggested. One challenge at a time. You survived Marco's abuse. You survived yesterday's public humiliation. You survived facing Roberto in his lair. Each time you face something hard and come through it, you'll be a little stronger. They talked for another hour, Kiara sharing stories about growing up as Dante's little sister, about their mother's kindness and their father's sternness, about the family dynamics that had shaped them both. Elena absorbed it all, building a picture of the world she was entering that was far more nuanced than the simple good versus evil narrative she'd been constructing. Finally, Dante appeared in the cafe doorway, his expression relaxing when he saw Elena safe with his sister. I should have known you'd ambush her, he said to Kiara, but his tone was affectionate. Someone had to save her from Roberto's hospitality, Kiara replied, standing to hug her brother. Besides, I like her. She's good for you. Try not to mess this up. I'll do my best. Dante's eyes went to Elena. Ready to go home? Home. The words settled over Elena like a warm blanket. Not her cramped apartment in Santa Croce, but the villa on the hillside where sunlight streamed through French doors and the garden smelled like lavender. They said goodbye to Kiara, who made Elena promise to call if she needed anything, then headed back to where Carlo waited with the car. As Florence slipped past the windows, Elena felt exhausted but oddly triumphant. She'd survived Roberto's assessment without breaking down or giving up. She'd found an ally in Kiara. She'd proven to herself, if no one else, that she could face this world without being destroyed by it. What did Roberto say after I left? Elena asked as they left the city behind. Dante was quiet for a moment. He warned me that choosing you over family interests would have consequences, that people would see it as weakness, that enemies might try to exploit it, that I was making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. And what did you say? I told him that for the first time in my life, I was making decisions based on what I wanted rather than what was expected of me, and that if he or anyone else tried to hurt you or our children to prove a point about weakness, they'd discover exactly how ruthless I can be when protecting what's mine. The word should have frightened Elena. That casual mention of ruthlessness, the implicit threat of violence against anyone who threatened her. But instead, she felt safe, protected, like she'd found someone who would stand between her and harm rather than being the source of it. Your sister is wonderful, Elena said, changing the subject slightly. She is, and she clearly likes you, which is high praise. Kiara doesn't give her approval easily. Dante's hand found Elena's. How are you feeling? Really? Overwhelmed, exhausted, weirdly proud of myself for not falling apart in there. Elena managed a small laugh. Is it always going to be like this? Meeting people who've already decided I'm not good enough, having to constantly prove myself? At first, yes, but Elena, you handled Roberto better than I expected. You didn't let him intimidate you into silence, didn't apologize for who you are, didn't beg for his approval. That's exactly what you needed to do. I had a good teacher, Elena said, squeezing his hand. Someone who keeps reminding me that I'm stronger than I think I am. They spent the rest of the drive in comfortable silence, Elena's head resting on Dante's shoulder. By the time they reached the villa, the sun was beginning its descent toward the hills, painting everything in shades of gold. Maria met them at the door with news that made Elena's heart sink. You have a visitor? The housekeeper said, her expression troubled. He insisted on waiting, said it was urgent he speak with you both. Who? Dante's voice had gone cold, alert. Marco Russo, Maria said quietly. He's been here for an hour, refusing to leave until you return. Elena felt ice flood her veins. Marco. Here, at the villa, invading the one place she'd felt safe from him. Dante's expression went deadly calm, that terrifying control settling over him like armor. Where is he? In the front sitting room. I had Paolo stay with him to make sure he didn't go wandering. Paolo was another security guard, Elena had learned. One of several people whose job was protecting Dante and the villa. Stay here, Dante ordered Elena, already moving toward the sitting room. But Elena caught his arm. No, If he came all this way, if he has something to say, I want to hear it. I need to face him, not hide while you handle it for me. Dante looked like he wanted to argue, to insist she stay away from the man who'd spent years destroying her confidence. But something in Elena's expression must have convinced him, because he nodded. Together, then. But Elena, if he says one cruel word, if he tries to hurt you in any way, I'm ending this conversation immediately. They found Marco in the sitting room, looking small and uncomfortable, surrounded by furniture that cost more than he made in a year. He stood when they entered, his eyes going immediately to Elena, with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What are you doing here, Marco?" Elena asked, pleased that her voice came out steady despite her racing heart. "I came to apologize," Marco said, the words clearly difficult for him. "For what I said in the street, for how I treated you during our marriage. For everything." The apology hung in the air between them, unexpected and somehow hollow, despite the obvious effort it took him to deliver it. "You already apologized," Elena pointed out. "In the street, when Dante made you. That wasn't real. That was me being terrified of what he'd do if I didn't comply." Marco's eyes shifted to Dante, then quickly away. I'm trying to actually apologize. To tell you that I was wrong, that you deserved better, He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." Elena studied her ex-husband, trying to determine if this was genuine remorse or just another manipulation. She'd seen Marco apologize before, usually right before he did the exact same thing again. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come here to Dante's home, to say this?" Marco's face flushed. "Because someone made it very clear to me that continuing to badmouth you or cause problems would have serious consequences. And because," he looked at her properly for the first time, "because seeing you with him, seeing how he defended you, made me realize what I threw away, what I destroyed with my own cruelty and stupidity." "If you're hoping I'll forgive you," Elena said slowly, "you're going to be disappointed. The things you said, the way you treated me, that's not something I can just forgive and forget because you've suddenly had an epiphany." "I don't expect forgiveness," Marco said quietly. "I just wanted you to know that I finally understand how badly I failed you, how much damage I caused, and that none of it was your fault, despite what I tried to make you believe." The admission was everything Elena had wanted to hear during those dark years of their marriage. The acknowledgement that she hadn't been the problem, that Marco's cruelty was his failing, not hers. But hearing it now, standing in Dante's villa with her hand in his, she realized something important. She didn't need Marco's validation anymore. Didn't need him to admit he was wrong in order for her to know her own worth. That realization was more powerful than any apology he could offer. "I accept your apology," Elena said finally, "not because I forgive you, but because I'm choosing to let go of the anger I've been carrying. You don't get to occupy space in my head anymore, Marco. You don't get to affect my happiness or my peace. This is me moving on." Marco nodded, looking relieved and sad in equal measure. "I heard about the babies, twins. Congratulations." "Thank you. For what it's worth, I think you'll be an amazing mother. Better than I deserved as a wife, certainly." He turned to Dante. "Take care of her. She's special. I was too stupid to see it, but you're not. Don't make my mistakes." Dante's expression remained cold, unforgiving. "You can leave now. And Marco? This is the last time you come to my home or approach Elena in any way. If I hear you've been anywhere near her, if you so much as mention her name in public, the consequences will be severe. Are we clear?" "Crystal." Marco moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Elena, I really am sorry. I hope you find all the happiness I couldn't give you." Then he was gone, leaving Elena and Dante alone in the sitting room as the sun continued its descent outside the windows. "How do you feel?" Dante asked gently. Elena considered the question. How did she feel? Not triumphant exactly, not vindicated or satisfied. Just lighter somehow. Like she'd been carrying Marco's voice in her head for so long that she'd forgotten what silence sounded like. "Free," she said finally. "I feel free." Dante pulled her close, and Elena let herself melt into his embrace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More family members to meet, more judgments to face, more steps on the journey of learning to navigate Dante's world. But today, in this moment, she felt like she'd crossed some invisible threshold. From victim to survivor, from broken to healing, from alone to cherished. The babies fluttered inside her, barely perceptible but there. Two tiny heartbeats that had already changed everything, that had brought her to this villa and this man and this impossible, complicated, extraordinary new life. "Come on," Dante said, pulling back to look at her face. "Let's have dinner on the terrace. Just us, the sunset, and the knowledge that you've survived everything this world has thrown at you so far." "So far," Elena repeated with a small smile. "You make it sound like there's more coming." "There's always more coming, but we'll face it together." Together, it was becoming Elena's favorite word. The weeks that followed Marco's apology fell into a rhythm that surprised Elena with its ordinariness. Morning sickness that gave way to afternoon energy. Doctor's appointments where she and Dante watched two tiny forms moving on ultrasound screens. Quiet dinners on the terrace as summer deepened into the kind of heat that made Florence shimmer. But beneath the domestic surface, Elena could feel herself changing. Not just her body, though that was transforming too, her belly rounding with unmistakable evidence of the lives growing inside her, but something deeper. The woman who'd stood frozen while Marco hurled insults was being replaced by someone who knew her own worth, who could face disapproval without crumbling. It was Kiara who became her guide through this transformation, driving from Milan twice a week to help Elena understand the unspoken rules of Dante's world. They spent hours in the villa's gardens, Kiara explaining which families mattered, which alliances were delicate, which people could be trusted, and which were always calculating angles. "The key is knowing when to be soft and when to show teeth," Kiara explained one afternoon as they watched the twins on the ultrasound photos Elena had brought outside. "Roberto respects strength, but if you're hard all the time, you'll exhaust yourself. Save the fight for battles that matter." "How do I know which battles matter?" "You'll know. Trust your instincts." Kiara handed back the photos with a smile. Two boys. Dante must be terrified. Elena laughed. Why terrified? Because he'll see himself in them. All the mistakes he made, all the pain he caused and endured, he'll want to protect them from everything. It's going to make him impossible. She wasn't wrong. As Elena's pregnancy progressed into the second trimester, Dante became increasingly protective. Security was doubled at the villa. Carlo or another guard accompanied Elena anywhere she went. Certain parts of Florence were declared off-limits because Dante deemed them too crowded or unpredictable. "You're suffocating me," Elena finally said one evening when Dante suggested she skip a gallery opening because it would mean being out after dark. "I appreciate the concern, but I can't live like a prisoner." Dante's jaw tightened. "You're not a prisoner. I'm trying to keep you safe." Safe from what? Random strangers? The statistically improbable chance something might happen? Elena stood, her hand on her expanding belly. "Dante, I survived years of actual abuse. I think I can handle going to an art show." That was different. Marco was cruel, but he wasn't... Dante stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "Wasn't what? Wasn't dangerous like the people in your world?" Elena's voice was sharp. "Then maybe you should tell me exactly what kind of danger you're protecting me from, because I can't navigate threats I don't understand." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things Dante clearly didn't want to say. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration Elena had come to recognize. "There are people who don't like that I've chosen you. People who see your presence in my life as a weakness they could exploit. And there are others, competitors, enemies, people I've crossed over the years, who might try to hurt me by hurting you or the babies. So the threats are real, not just paranoia. Very real. Which is why I need you to take the security seriously, to understand that when I ask you not to do something, it's not about control, it's about keeping you alive." Elena sank back into her chair, the weight of that reality settling over her. She'd known abstractly that Dante's world was dangerous, but hearing him say it so directly made it visceral, immediate. "I can't live in fear," she said quietly, "and I can't raise our sons to be afraid of the world. So we need to find a balance between keeping us safe and letting us actually live." Dante was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. I'm terrified of losing you. losing them. And that fear has been making me controlling in ways that aren't fair to you. So we compromise. I take security seriously, listen when you say something is genuinely dangerous. And you trust that I'm not going to do anything reckless, that I understand there are real threats. Deal. Dante pulled her close, his hand settling on her belly where one of the twins was actively kicking. They're strong, like their mother. They'd better be. They're going to need that strength growing up in your world. As summer faded into autumn, Elena's body continued its transformation. At 24 weeks, her belly was unmistakably pregnant, the twins making their presence known with constant movement. Dr. Ricci, the obstetrician Dante had insisted on, the best in Florence naturally, pronounced everything perfect, both babies growing right on schedule. Have you thought about names? The doctor asked during one appointment, pointing out tiny features on the ultrasound screen. Elena and Dante exchanged glances. They'd been avoiding the conversation, both aware that names carried weight in Dante's family, expectations and traditions that Elena didn't fully understand. We're still discussing it, Dante said diplomatically. Later, in the car heading back to the villa, Elena brought it up. Your family will have opinions about names, won't they? Roberto will certainly try to insist they be named after important Valieris. My father, probably, or his father. Dante's tone made clear what he thought of that idea. But Elena, these are our sons. We name them what we want. Family expectations be damned. What was your father's name? Alessandro. Elena tested it silently. Alessandro Valieri. It was a beautiful name, traditional and strong. What was he like, your father? Hard, fair, completely devoted to my mother until she died. Then just empty, going through the motions. Dante was quiet for a moment. I don't want to be like him. Don't want to love you so much that losing you would break me. But I'm starting to think it's too late for that. The admission made Elena's chest tight. You're not going to lose me. You can't promise that. Life is unpredictable, and in my world especially, things can go wrong in an instant. Then we make the most of whatever time we have. We build something beautiful and strong, and we teach our sons to do the same. Elena found his hand. Your father loved your mother. That's not a weakness, Dante. That's the best part of being human, the ability to love even knowing you might lose them. The trees along the road had started turning gold and red, autumn painting Tuscany in shades of fire. Elena watched them blur past, thinking about names and legacy and the weight of family history. What about Luca? She suggested. For one of them. It means light, and I like the idea of our sons bringing light into the world rather than just perpetuating darkness. Dante considered it. Luca Valieri. I like it. And for the other? You choose something that matters to you. Marco, Dante said after a moment, then caught Elena's expression. Not after your ex, after my mother's father. Marco Benedetti. He was the one who taught me that strength doesn't always mean violence, that sometimes the bravest thing is choosing mercy over revenge. Elena smiled. Luca and Marco. Light and strength. I think they'll grow into those names beautifully. That evening, they told Maria and Carlo about the names, the housekeeper immediately tearing up while the stoic security guard actually smiled. Word spread through the villa's small staff, and by dinner, there was a celebratory feeling in the air, as if naming the babies had made them more real somehow, more present, despite still having months before their arrival. But that joy was short-lived. 2 days later, Dante received a phone call that changed everything. Elena was in the nursery, now fully renovated with 2 cribs, soft rugs, and walls painted a soothing sage green, when she heard Dante's voice raised in anger from his study. She made her way down the hall, finding him pacing while speaking rapid Italian into his phone, his free hand clenched into a fist. When he saw her, his expression shifted to controlled calm, but Elena could see the fury beneath it. I'll handle it, he said into the phone, then ended the call. What's wrong? Dante was quiet for a moment, clearly debating how much to tell her. Then he seemed to decide that honesty was better than protection. Someone leaked information about your pregnancy to the press. Not just that you're pregnant, but medical details, the twins, their due date, even the names we chose. It's all over the news sites, complete with speculation about whether I'll marry you before they're born. Elena felt her stomach drop. How? Who would? Someone with access to either our doctor's office or someone we trusted enough to share the information with. Dante's voice was ice. I'm having it investigated, but the damage is done. By tomorrow, every gossip site in Italy will have the story. Can we sue them? Make them retract it? We can try. But Elena, once information is out there, it's nearly impossible to contain. He moved to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders despite the rage she could feel radiating from him. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have been more careful about who knew what, should have anticipated that someone would try to exploit this. It's not your fault, Elena said, even though part of her wanted to rage at the invasion of privacy, the feeling that even her medical information wasn't safe. We'll deal with it, like we've dealt with everything else. But dealing with it proved more complicated than either of them anticipated. By the next morning, Elena's phone was flooded with messages from reporters wanting comments. Photographers appeared outside the villa gates, cameras with long lenses trying to capture shots of her growing belly. The story had exploded beyond simple pregnancy news into full speculation about the Valieri family's future, complete with unflattering comparisons between Elena and women like Vittoria, who the press deemed more suitable. You should stay inside, Dante said over breakfast, his jaw tight as he scrolled through the various articles. At least until the initial frenzy dies down. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she wouldn't be cowed by tabloid attention. But the truth was, the idea of facing those cameras, of having her pregnancy documented and dissected by strangers, made her feel sick. Okay, she agreed quietly. But Dante, we can't hide forever. Eventually, I'll need to be seen, to show that I'm not ashamed or afraid. We'll figure it out. But right now, keeping you and the babies safe is what matters. The leak investigation moved quickly, Dante's resources and connections cutting through red tape that would have stopped most people. Within 48 hours, they had an answer, and it wasn't one Elena had expected. The source was Alessia, Marco's girlfriend. She'd somehow obtained Elena's medical records through a friend who worked at Dr. Ricci's office and sold the information to a tabloid for a substantial sum. The betrayal stung, though Elena couldn't claim to be entirely surprised. Alessia had never been more than a shallow status seeker, someone who'd probably seen dollar signs the moment she realized what information she had access to. What will happen to her? Elena asked when Dante explained. Legally, Dr. Ricci is pursuing charges for violating patient privacy. The tabloid is being sued. Alessia will likely face criminal charges. Dante's expression was grim. And personally, I'm making sure everyone in Florence knows what she did. She'll find employment difficult, social invitations scarce. No one will want to associate with someone who's proven they can't be trusted. That seems harsh for Marco. He wasn't involved. No, but he chose her. He's responsible for the company he keeps. Dante's tone left no room for argument. This is how my world works, Elena. Betrayals have consequences. People need to understand that targeting you means facing my full resources and influence. Elena understood the logic. Even as part of her felt uncomfortable with the swift, decisive punishment being meted out. This was the reality of Dante's power, the ability to destroy someone's life with a few phone calls, to make them untouchable in the social and professional circles that mattered. But she also understood that this was protecting her, protecting their sons. And in Dante's world, showing weakness meant inviting more attacks. The scandal slowly died down over the following weeks, replaced by new gossip and fresh meat for the tabloid machine. Elena ventured out again, first to quiet cafes with Kiara, then to the gallery opening she'd originally wanted to attend. Photographers still occasionally appeared, but the initial frenzy had passed, replaced by routine documentation of the pregnant woman connected to Dante Valieri. At 30 weeks, Elena's body felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. Her belly was enormous, the twins running out of room and making their displeasure known with constant jabs and kicks. Sleep became difficult, her back ached constantly, and even simple tasks like putting on shoes required strategic planning. I look like I swallowed a beach ball, she complained one morning, struggling to see her feet. You look beautiful, Dante corrected, helping her into the comfortable dress Maria had laid out. Glowing, like some Renaissance painting of abundance and fertility. I feel like a whale. A very elegant whale. He kissed her forehead. Besides, Dr. Ricci said the twins are perfect. Strong heartbeats, good positioning. Everything is going exactly as it should. Elena knew he was right, but knowing didn't make the physical discomfort any easier to bear. She spent increasing amounts of time resting, her energy depleting faster as her body worked to sustain 3 lives instead of 1. It was during one of these afternoon rest periods that Kiara arrived unannounced, looking worried in a way that immediately set Elena's nerves on edge. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, struggling to sit up on the sofa where she'd been napping. "Roberto called a family meeting," Kiara said without preamble. "For tonight. He's demanding Dante attend, and he's making noise about how Dante's personal life is affecting business decisions." "What does that mean?" "It means he's trying to undermine Dante. Again. Using you and the pregnancy as evidence that Dante's judgment is compromised." Kiara sat beside Elena, her expression serious. "My brother will handle it. He always does. But I thought you should know what's happening. Roberto's not going to stop pushing until Dante either puts him in his place definitively or gives in to family pressure." Elena felt anger rise, sharp and clarifying. "So Roberto wants what? For Dante to send me away? To pretend the twins don't exist?" "He wants Dante to marry someone suitable and treat you as a mistress rather than a partner. Keep you hidden away. Acknowledge the children, but don't give them legitimacy." Kiara's disgust was clear. "It's archaic and insulting and exactly the kind of thinking I left Milan to escape." "Where's Dante now?" "Preparing for the meeting. Calling in favors, making sure he has the support he needs to shut Roberto down." Kiara hesitated. "Elena, you should know. If this goes badly, if Roberto manages to turn enough of the family against Dante, it could create real problems. Not just personally, but for Dante's position, his business interests, everything he's built." The weight of that responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders like a physical burden. Her presence in Dante's life was creating complications that threatened everything he'd worked for. Would he eventually resent her for it? Would there come a day when he looked at her and saw only the problems she represented, rather than the life they were building? "I should talk to him," Elena said, struggling to her feet despite Kiara's protests, "before he goes to this meeting." She found Dante in his study, surrounded by papers and phone records, his expression harder than she'd seen it in weeks. When he looked up and saw her in the doorway, that hardness softened immediately. "You should be resting," he said, standing. "I should be here, supporting you." Elena moved into the room, one hand on her lower back. "Kiara told me about the meeting, about what Roberto's trying to do. It's nothing I can't handle. Dante, I need to know something, honestly." Elena took a breath. "If choosing me means losing everything else, your position, your family's support, the power you've built, would you still choose me?" The question hung between them, huge and terrifying. Elena watched Dante's face, looking for any hint of hesitation, any flicker of doubt. "Yes," he said simply. "Without question, without reservation. You and our sons are what matters now. Everything else is just maintenance. Necessary, but not essential. Even if it means war with your own family?" "Especially then, because if I back down now, if I let Roberto dictate my personal life, I'll never be free of his influence. He'll always hold it over me, always use it as leverage." Dante crossed to her, his hands gentle on her face. "This meeting tonight, it's not just about you or us. It's about whether I'm going to live my life on my own terms or spend it dancing to music other people choose." Elena understood. This was bigger than just their relationship. This was Dante drawing a line, establishing boundaries, claiming autonomy over his own future. "Then go," she said. "Handle Roberto, and when you come back, we'll start planning our wedding." Dante's eyes widened slightly. "Wedding? You think I'm having your babies without making an honest man of you?" Elena managed a smile despite her nerves. "Besides, I want our sons to be born legitimate. Want them to have your name without any question or complication. So yes, wedding, soon. Is this a proposal?" "It's a practical solution to a complex problem." Elena's smile turned genuine. "But if you want romance, I suppose you'll have to propose properly at some point." Dante laughed, the sound breaking the tension that had filled the study. Challenge accepted. Though fair warning, when I propose, it won't be practical at all. It'll be grand and dramatic and probably embarrassing for both of us. I'll look forward to it. Now go, face down your uncle. Show him that choosing love over strategy doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The family meeting happened that evening in Roberto's palazzo, and Elena waited at the villa with Kiara for news. The hours crawled by, both women too anxious to do anything but pace and speculate. Finally, near midnight, Dante returned. His tie was loosened, his expression exhausted but triumphant. "Well?" Elena demanded, struggling up from the sofa where she'd been attempting to rest. "It's done. Roberto tried to turn the family against me, tried to paint you as a liability, and our relationship as a disaster waiting to happen. But I had support he didn't expect. Cousins who believed in choosing personal happiness, business partners who respected the way I've handled things, even one of the old guard who told Roberto to stop living in the past. So you won?" "We won. Roberto's influence is diminished, and I've made it clear that any future interference in my personal life will result in removing him from his business positions entirely." Dante sank into a chair, pulling Elena onto his lap, despite her protests about her weight. He's not happy, but he's accepted that he can't control this. Can't control me. Kiara applauded softly from across the room. About time someone put him in his place. Now, I'm going to head back to Milan and let you two celebrate in private. She hugged them both, whispering to Elena, "I told you he'd handle it." After Kiara left, Elena and Dante sat in comfortable silence, his hand tracing circles on her enormous belly where the twins were settling down for the night. "So," Dante said eventually, "about this wedding you mentioned, were you serious?" "Completely. Unless you've changed your mind about wanting to marry someone so impractical and unsuitable." Elena's tone was teasing, but there was real vulnerability beneath it. "I haven't changed my mind about anything. If anything, watching you navigate these past months, handling Roberto's judgment, Vittoria's bitterness, the media invasion, all while growing our children, has only made me more certain that you're exactly who I want beside me. Then marry me, before the twins are born, before something else comes up to complicate things. Just marry me." Dante shifted her carefully so he could look at her face. "Elena Moretti, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Will you build a life with me, raise our sons together, face whatever comes with the knowledge that we're stronger together than apart?" "That's a terrible proposal," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "It's supposed to be you asking me." "I am asking you. I'm asking if you'll take a chance on a man who comes with complications and danger and family drama. I'm asking if you'll trust me to protect you while letting you stand beside me rather than behind me. I'm asking if you love me enough to navigate this impossible world together." "Yes," Elena whispered. "Yes to all of it. To you, to us, to whatever comes next." They married 3 weeks later in the villa's garden, with only close friends and immediate family present. Kiara stood as Elena's witness, glowing with happiness for her brother. Even Roberto attended, though his expression remained carefully neutral throughout the ceremony. Elena wore a simple cream dress that accommodated her 33-week belly, flowers from the villa's garden in her hair. Dante looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, his hand trembling slightly when he slipped the ring onto her finger. The ceremony was brief, the celebration intimate. As the sun set over the Tuscan hills, Elena stood with her new husband, surrounded by people who'd become family, and felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. "Ready for the next adventure?" Dante murmured against her ear as they danced slowly to music from a small ensemble. "Born ready," Elena replied, then gasped as one of the twins delivered a particularly strong kick. "Though I think they're eager to join us soon." She was more right than she knew. At 35 weeks, 2 weeks earlier than expected, but not dangerously premature, Elena went into labor in the middle of the night. Dante remained calm, or at least appeared calm, as he got her to the hospital, held her hand through contractions, and breathed with her the way they'd practiced in birthing classes. Luca arrived first, screaming his displeasure at the world with impressive volume. Marco followed 12 minutes later, quieter but no less determined. Both boys were small but healthy, their tiny hands gripping their parents' fingers with surprising strength. "They're perfect," Elena whispered. exhausted and elated as the nurse placed both babies on her chest. Absolutely perfect. Dante stood beside the hospital bed, one hand on each of his sons, his expression transformed by wonder and terror in equal measure. We made these. We created two whole people. We did. Elena looked up at him, seeing her own joy reflected in his face. And we're going to do everything in our power to give them a better world than the one we found. The first days of parenthood were chaos. Sleepless nights, constant feedings, the overwhelming responsibility of keeping two tiny humans alive. But they managed, helped by Maria, who'd appointed herself unofficial grandmother, Kiara, who drove from Milan every weekend to provide support, and even Carlo, who revealed an unexpected talent for soothing crying babies. 3 months after the twins were born, Elena stood in the nursery watching them sleep. They'd grown so much already, developing distinct personalities. Luca was louder, more demanding, while Marco was thoughtful, studying the world with serious dark eyes that reminded Elena heartbreakingly of Dante. "You should be sleeping while they sleep," Dante said from the doorway, his voice quiet to avoid waking the babies. "I know, but I can't stop watching them, can't stop marveling that they're real and ours." Dante came to stand beside her, his arm around her waist. "Do you regret it? Choosing this life, this world?" Elena considered the question seriously. The past 9 months had been the hardest of her life, facing judgment, learning to navigate a world she didn't understand, dealing with invasive press and family politics and constant security concerns. But they'd also brought her more joy than she'd thought possible. "Not for a second," she said honestly. "It's been hard and scary and overwhelming, but Dante, looking at them, at what we've built, I wouldn't change any of it. Even the parts where Roberto was insufferable? Especially those parts. They taught me I was stronger than I thought." Elena turned to face him. "You once said your father loved your mother so much that losing her broke him. I understand that now, because I love you and our son so fiercely that losing you would destroy me. And that's terrifying, but it's also the most alive I've ever felt." Dante kissed her forehead, his arms tight around her. "Then we'll be terrified together. And we'll teach Luca and Marco that loving fiercely isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing anyone can do." 6 months later, Elena stood in a Florence gallery, not the small one where she used to work, but a prestigious space in the heart of the city. The opening was for an exhibition she'd curated, focused on Renaissance women artists who'd been overlooked by history. It had taken months of research and preparation, but the result was stunning. A collection that told stories of women who'd created beauty despite the constraints of their time. Dante arrived late, having been delayed by a business meeting, but his pride was evident as he moved through the gallery, studying each piece. "This is incredible," he said, finding Elena among the crowd of critics and art lovers. "You've created something really special here." "We created something special," Elena corrected, gesturing around them. "This wouldn't exist without your support, your belief that I had something valuable to offer beyond just being your wife and the mother of your children." The twins were with Maria tonight, giving Elena and Dante a rare evening alone. They stayed until the last guest left, then walked through Florence hand in hand, enjoying the spring warmth and the city's timeless beauty. "Do you remember the day we met?" Elena asked as they crossed the Ponte Vecchio. "At that gallery opening 4 years ago? You were wearing a blue dress and talking about Persephone's descent," Dante recalled. "You made me see that painting differently, made me understand it was about choice and power rather than just abduction. I had no idea who you were, no idea that the man asking me about mythology would end up being my husband, the father of my children, my partner in building something extraordinary. Would you have run if you'd known?" Dante's tone was teasing, but there was real curiosity beneath it. Elena considered. "Probably. The old me, the one who believed Marco's lies about my worthlessness, she would have been too intimidated to even speak to you. But maybe everything happened the way it needed to. Maybe I had to be broken down to nothing before I could rebuild into someone strong enough for this life." They paused at the center of the bridge, looking out over the Arno as lights reflected off the water. Somewhere in the villa on the hillside, 2 little boys slept peacefully, watched over by people who loved them. Somewhere in the city, life continued, people making mistakes and finding redemption, falling in love and facing hardships, building futures from the broken pieces of their pasts. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked. that I'm grateful for all of it, the good parts and the hard parts, the victories and the struggles, because they all led here, to this moment, to this life we've built together. Elena turned to face him, the man who'd defended her when she couldn't defend herself, who'd chosen her when everyone said she was unsuitable, who'd stood beside her as she transformed from victim to survivor to someone who knew her own strength. "I love you," Dante said simply. 4 years ago, a year ago, today, tomorrow, nothing changes that. You're it for me, Elena, the love that makes the terror worthwhile. I love you too, even though you're impossible and overprotective and occasionally insufferable. Occasionally? Fine, frequently. But you're my impossible, overprotective, frequently insufferable husband, and I wouldn't have it any other way. They walked home through Florence's ancient streets, past buildings that had witnessed centuries of love stories and tragedies, triumphs and failures. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Luca was teething and making everyone miserable. Marco had a doctor's appointment. Elena's next exhibition needed planning, and Dante had meetings that would keep him busy for days. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. Not because life had become easy or because all their problems were solved, but because they'd learned the truth that Elena's favorite Caravaggio painting had always tried to teach. That sometimes the greatest beauty emerges from the deepest darkness. That transformation often requires breaking before rebuilding. And that choosing love in a world that often demands strategy is the bravest act of all. The woman who'd once stood frozen while strangers laughed at her humiliation was gone. In her place stood Elena Valieri, wife, mother, curator, survivor. Someone who'd learned that being chosen by a powerful man was less important than choosing herself. That protection meant partnership rather than control, and that the fairy tale everyone assumed she'd stumbled into was actually something far more precious. A real life, built on honesty and respect and fierce devotion. A family forged not from bloodlines and obligations, but from the conscious choice to love despite fear, to trust despite risk, to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before. And as Florence settled into the quiet hours of night, as the twins dreamed their baby dreams and the villa stood sentinel on its hillside, Elena Valieri finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, but a person. Not security, but belonging. Not the end of her story, but a beginning that would continue to unfold in ways she couldn't predict but no longer feared. Because whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. She'd face it beside the man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, with 2 small boys who would grow up knowing they were loved fiercely and unconditionally, in a world that was complicated and dangerous and occasionally cruel, but also capable of extraordinary beauty when you found the courage to choose love over fear. And that, Elena decided, as Dante pulled her close and the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, was more than enough.